Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the No Laying Up podcast. My name is Randy. This is your United States Women's Open preview. It's going to be a fun one. We're going to dive into the history of the event led by our exceptional teacher, Miss Jordan Perez, similar to what we did last year for the AIG Women's Open. So if you enjoyed that episode, hopefully this one will be right up your alley as well. Let me introduce my co-host. I mentioned Jordan. JP, how are you this morning? Are you prepared with your history lesson?
I feel like I'm prepared. The pressure's on. I just want to do this championship right. It's my country's open. I feel a lot of pressure to get it right.
Of course, of course. Well, I'm eagerly anticipating. And joining me in class today, of course, Cody McBride. Cody, are you ready to get your learning on today?
I told JP just a little bit ago, I'm so excited for this. I learned so much last year when we did her deep dive. I think the way that she goes about the research, preparing everything, and then presenting it to us, I just pick up so much. So I'm very, very excited, Big.
I am too. I'm psyched. JP, I'm going to have you hold for just a second. Cody, why don't we thank our first sponsor, and that's our good friends at Titleist.
That's right, Big. Thanks to Titleist and specifically the Vokey SM10 wedges. We all know how important wedge play, short game play, anything around the green is at any U.S. Open venue. And that's why more players on the LPGA Tour this season have had Vokey design SM10 wedges in their bag than any other brand. There are three main key areas to great wedge play, and Vokey's SM10s have been designed to improve performance in each. Number one, shot versatility. Your swing is unique and requires the right tools. With 6 tour-proven grinds, SM10 allows you to find your ideal setup to provide flawless contact and maximize versatility for everything the course demands. Number 2, distance and trajectory control. The SM10 delivers a lower, more consistent flight to give you more control with your approach play. And number 3, maximum spin. Every SM10 groove is cut to the edge with Vokey's patented spin milled groove cutting process to provide a score line that delivers higher, more consistent spin wedge after wedge. Nothing does more to sharpen your short game than a fresh set of wedges that have been fit to your needs. That's right. Find your nearest Vokey fitter or use the online wedge selector tool to unlock the right SM10s for you at Vokey.com. Thanks to them.
Wonderful. Thank you to Titleist. Cody, before we do dive into the US Open, I think the big news that broke late last week, of course, the LPGA has named a new commissioner. That is Craig Kessler, and he's coming over from the PGA of America. You were able to listen in on his introductory press conference. I was just curious, any big takeaways, thoughts from hearing him speak for the first time?
Yeah, a lot, Big. I'm actually pretty excited, but I know it's very easy to get excited at introduction press conferences, and he hasn't really stepped into the job yet. That's not going to come until July 15th. So, as you said, Craig Kessler, he's going to be the 10th commissioner of the LPGA Tour. He's currently the COO of the PGA of America, running all, who could say 30,000, sometimes it's 31,000. It all depends on what day.
3,100 strong. Yeah.
No, not 3,100, 31,000.
31,000, excuse me.
Yeah. That's a lot of people,
That
you know?
is. It
He,
absolutely.
uh, he came there from so this is the thing, is that everybody automatically defaults his background to being in Topgolf, which he was. He was the COO at Topgolf and really helped grow that into the platform that it was. And I don't really want to say is, because I think Topgolf's also going through some weird stuff right now, but he did have a little bit of a gap in between where he left and became the CEO of a soap company, Buff City
Yeah,
Soap.
this was
But
interesting.
yeah, he also has a ton of experience in private equity, wealth management. He's worked for McKinsey. He's
Mm,
bounced around quite a bit there before he came over to Topgolf, and that was kind of his first job in golf. We don't know exactly what, like, I don't know if he grew up playing golf or like where his current skill is, but I'm reasonably certain that you can say like he's a golf guy and he's been in the golf industry for a long time, that he has relationships with a lot of the key players that run golf, that work in golf, and he's going to utilize those relationships to their full extent. And he made that very, very clear. So he came in, he introduced what his 4 pillars or building blocks are going to be, as how he kind of sets up his commissionership here. So the first one being trust. And he said that's with his players, with the sponsors, with the fans, and definitely trust within his own team at the LPGA Tour. Obviously, you don't even need like little subtle hints here. Trust was broken under the previous commissioner, specifically between the players and the tour that she represents on behalf of those players. So very good job on him coming out right out of the gate discussing that. The second one, visibility. I love this. He openly talked about his broadcast, how people consume his product, his players, and what he wants to do to have the conversations to improve that. Fully knowing that we have 5 years left on the current TV contract. There's a lot of things that are going to need to change, but with his relationship with those key players now, he made it very, very well known that it does not matter how much work and effort they put into players development, development of players, development of the tour itself, its structure, its staff, how it is perceived and presented to the world makes all the difference. And he knows that as lands solely at the feet of his broadcast partners. So I'm very, very excited to hear him openly talk about that. So the third one, building fans. He doesn't want people to just watch the LPGA Tour. He wants people to really root on the LPGA Tour members, their players, and really it as a core. He wants people to become fanatics. He obviously has learned a lot of this from the growth of women's college basketball into the WNBA now. And I'll say this big, I've watched more WNBA games at the start of this year than I have in my entire life. I'm caught up in it, and I think it's just because there's drama, there's intrigue, there's amazing players, and I think it's kind of like the NBA was before everybody just like either dunked or shot in 3-pointers from half court. Like it's just an incredible time, and I think he's comes in from an outsider's perspective to be able to figure out ways to capture that. And
Yeah.
he wants people invested in that. He wants the fan clubs, and not just like the fan clubs that we've seen in Korea and everything else like that. He wants people vocally being like, Nelly is my girl. Like I ride or die with her, or throw any other name that you want out there right now. And the last one, he talked about the financial future, made it very, very, very clear. He is willing to accept phone calls and meetings with any organization or company that wants to work with the LPGA Tour. He was asked specifically about Live, PIF, their investment. He said, absolutely, I want to talk to them. So clearly seeing what's happening on the Ladies European Tour, the PIF's new investment. They're continuing to expand their Aramco series there into something that is new and, the next iteration of that. So he doesn't really care who you are, what your company represents or anything. He is 100% focused on, if you want to work with us, we'll probably find a way to work with you. So that's kind of
Open
it.
for business.
Yep.
Yeah. Very good. Honestly, a lot of great sounding things in there. Those 4 pillars really seem to talk to each other in a lot of ways. I think the one thing to note, his first day is July 15th. And
Correct.
unlike his predecessor, it seems like the expectation will be for him to really hit the ground running. I don't think there's going to be any fact finding tour 6 month, get your feet under you.
I
I
have a
think,
follow-up for you on that. So
okay.
he talked about that. That's not just hearsay or what people want to believe is going to happen. He said, "No, my job starts, day 1 is July 15th." And he gave massive credit to the LPGA committee that they put together to go through this selection and hiring process to get to where he's at. He's been working on this and going through this through multiple conversations, not just with current staff at the LPGA Tour, but really players since the beginning of the year. And he feels that he is armed with information and will continue to learn more and be armed with more stuff that he does not have the space to get his feet underneath him. He is going to make decisions right away, and he's very open and honest about the transparency of, if we mess up on something, I'm okay with that as a leader, because at least we're trying to change things that's going to put this tour in a better spot than it was. And mistakes will happen, but you will get nothing but transparency from us along the way, which obviously, we've had a couple stumbles the last couple years. If you want to talk about Solheim Cup and delays and bad press releases and really just like confusion about a lot of things that are going on, he's ready. He's excited to get going. July 15th is his day. But again, it's a lot of words until you see some action. But I am pretty excited about the direction that the LPGA Tour is going to go.
Awesome. I'm like you. It sounds great. The proof will be in the pudding. I'm eager to see, just how aggressively and quickly we see any shakeups, changes. It'll be certainly interesting as he gets going. We should say, would love to have him on the NLU podcast. Hopefully, that's something we can get done shortly into his tenure. So hopefully we'll have a chance to ask him some questions directly. Let's move, JP. I'm going to bring you in here. Big news last week as well from women's college golf. Some are calling it the biggest upset in women's golf history. The Northwestern Wildcats defeat the mighty Stanford Cardinal to win the NCAA team national championship. Tell me about it. Is this the biggest upset? Put into context kind of the effort or the, David versus Goliath that was going on here between Northwestern and Stanford.
Yeah, that no one had that on their bingo card, and if they say they did, they're lying. It really impressive day of match play from Northwestern. I mean, they were the 10th best team in the country, so it's not like, there were a bunch of randos showing up, but I was stunned by Stanford, and it's not like it was bad golf at all. It was very good golf, like legitimately like great golf being played pretty much the entire day. It's just Northwestern really took it to them. It's interesting because this Stanford team, and I feel like this really came full circle for me this year. This Stanford team is much better than the ones that have been like so well marketed and so well publicized the past few years. Like, legitimately, every girl in their starting lineup would be the best player on like any given team in the country. Like, they are all within basically the top 20 in the world. They're so good. And so it was just so surprising to see them get beat. I mean, but shout out to Northwestern. I mean, that was phenomenal. Went all the way to the last hole. And that's what you want out of an NCAA championship. And I know there was
Yeah.
some debate this week, and usually this happens this time of year, about, is a match play championship the way to go? Does that really decide the best team? And I think, yeah, I mean, if you are the best team that day and every day, you're winning in a match play final, no doubt. And I think stroke play is very important too, but that takes into account more of an individuality. This tests the team in the most purest way. And Northwestern, evidently, and just as we saw on the broadcast and just a lot of those conversations that they had, they are a great team. Like, at their core, they worked really hard to put that team together. I think it seemed like it was a very fairly new team that was assembled. I guess they were working a lot on trust within each other, and they talked a lot about that on the broadcast, but that, I guess, over the year they just came together really strongly and just made this incredible run that, like I said, nobody saw coming. So that was phenomenal. I mean, obviously it's Stanford, so they'll be back. I mean, I don't think Stanford's going away anytime soon. But yeah, what a great year of college golf, truly.
Congrats to Northwestern coach Emily Fletcher. Of course, her whole team. It's Northwestern's first title as a program. Yeah, just as you said, an excellent day of golf out there at Omni La Costa Resort and Spa. Cody, what can you tell us? Maybe a little bit more about Omni here.
That's right. And now from a word for our friends at Omni Hotels and Resorts, the official hotel of no laying up. Spring is here. Summer is here. Man, it's crazy. Summer golf knocking at the door, and there's no better time to start planning your next bucket list golf trip than now. One course that we want to put on your radar is the newly renovated Oak Marsh Golf Course at Omni A Million Island Resort and Spa, officially reopening for public play this month. This course has been refreshed by Bo Welling Design in honor of Pete Dye's iconic original layout, while bringing it up to speed for the modern game. Nestled on over 1,300 acres of oceanfront property in Northeast Florida, this $7.4 million renovation features rebuilt greens, repositioned bunkers, expanded native areas, and a flexible new ribbon tee system offering nearly unlimited teeing options. Whether you're in it for the views, the challenge, or the history, this is one you do not want to miss. Speaking of iconic venues, we have been watching the NCAA championship at Omni's La Costa famed North Course. We saw the women. We're getting ready for the men to wrap up. It's been amazing. We'll see the top collegiate players take on this tough layout brought back to life by Gil Hance after his stunning 2024 reservation. With 13 Omni golf destinations and 28 courses and short courses at your disposal, what are you waiting for? Head to omnihotels.com/golf to play the possibilities. Thanks to Omni. Yeah, I'm excited, Big. Of course, they play it on the North Course at Omni La Costa Resort and Spa.
All right, a nice little second ad in the can. That's going to free us up the rest of the episode here, folks. Let's turn our attention, main event, U.S. Women's Open. I think one of the absolute marquee events in the world of women's golf this year, every year. The USGA does a fantastic job with this event. It is at Erin Hills, just outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The course is they're setting the course up to play as a par 72. I think it's going to be about 6,800 yards, give or take some change each day. We have a great broadcast schedule. That's one of my favorite parts about the U.S. Open. We get to see a lot of golf. The schedule specifically Thursday, Friday is going to be noon to 6 p.m. Eastern time on USA Network, and then 2 additional hours right after that, 6 to 8 p.m. on Peacock. On the weekend, we're going to get 1 to 3 p.m. Saturday on Peacock, and then 3 to 6 p.m. on NBC, and then Sunday, 2 to 7 p.m. Eastern, all on NBC. I think Tommy Roy is going to have, the full closet of toys at his disposal. It's going to look like a major championship broadcast. So should be a great week of golf. Our schedule for NLU purposes, of course, this is our preview episode. Wednesday, we're going to have a happy hour, mainly U.S. Women's Open. Saturday, we're going to do a live show at the completion of play. And then, of course, Sunday as well, we're going to be back with a live show. So tune in, join us. Going to be a fantastic week of golf. I can't wait to see how Erin Hills plays. We went there last year. If you have not seen our NLU Club Championship videos, we took the whole squad to Erin Hills. So if you want to get a little view of the course, perhaps see how some mere mortals played it, you can check that out on our YouTube channel. But guys, I think other than that, I'm JP. Are you ready? I'm about ready to turn it over to you and let you drive here the rest of the show.
I'm ready, boys. Let's do it.
All right.
So we are diving into the history of the U.S. Women's Open, which is currently the oldest of the 5 women's majors. Now, it was not the first women's major ever, but it came at a really progressive time for women's golf. And you'll see a lot of parallels between the U.S. Women's Open and the Women's British Open. And I'm happy to point them out as long as we go. But if you listen to that episode, you'll be able to identify them along the way when it comes to kind of purse growth, venue selection, who's organizing it, how they're organizing it, that kind of stuff. So stick with me.
We're not going to have any Weetabix sponsorship, though, I don't think, on the U.S. Open.
No. Unfortunately not.
I know that's the only sponsor on the British Open side that sticks with me. I know there were some fun ones though.
What was
Anyway,
it?
sorry to interrupt, teacher. Yeah, I'll let you get
Yeah.
on with the plan here.
No Weetabix sponsorships, but a lot of weird and wacky facts along the way. I was really committed to making this, serious to a point of really illustrating just how important this championship is to women's golf history, but also fun because there's a lot of fun history in the U.S. Women's Open. So without any further delay, let's get into it. I'm going to start chronologically. My notes are very organized by decade, but we're not going to go by every year because that That would be a lot. We're not gonna do that.
We could
So
do a 10-part series if you want.
I
We can,
oh
yeah.
yeah. I mean, if we're really itching for that, yeah, let's do it. So anyway, 79 years ago, this tournament was established. It's at a time, it's post World War II, right after post World War II. We're like fresh into playing golf again. We are, I wouldn't say getting back into hobbies, but it's like very much the infancy of professional women's golf. Because it kind of gets its start a little bit in the early 30s, but nothing too monumental yet. The Women's Western Open is being played often. At that time, the oldest women's major.
Hmm.
So a lot of that is going around. But yeah, 1946, the inaugural US Women's Open. It's a match play event and it's a collab, right? So it was started by what is the WPGA and the Spokane Athletic Roundtable, which was a men's organization. And the WPGA is very important here. If you remember the Ladies Golf Union from the Women's British Open and how
Yeah.
they started the Women's Open, some parallels here with that. The WPGA runs the US Women's Open for about 3 years before the LPGA is founded and the USGA essentially takes over. But the WPGA, still groundbreaking, still monumental. It was tough. It wasn't easy for them. They were founded in 1944 by Betty Hicks, Ellen Griffin, and Hope Sanius. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It was the first professional tour for women in the US. It's pretty small. They only hosted 7 tournaments. In 1945, they tried to subsume under the PGA of America. They were turned down. Subsequently asked for support from the Golf Manufacturers Association, also get turned down there. And a lack of capital causes them to fold in 1948, and then they go defunct in 1949. My point is, they tried. They really, really tried. But luckily, there was enough interest and enough women that were excited to found the LPGA, which we'll get into a little bit more later.
Which I find interesting that you mentioned the 3 founders of the WPGA. I don't believe none of them were then among the 13 original LPGA founders, which,
Nope.
yeah, I guess is just a little curious. Or not curious, just interesting, maybe.
It is interesting. I guess they just were kind of like, yeah, y'all got it. No, we don't want anything to do with that. No. So anywho, speaking of a lack of capital and purses and needing to get things off the ground, the Spokane Athletic Roundtable, which I mentioned earlier, collabed on this inaugural U.S. Women's Open, had to fund a majority of the purse, which was $90,700. The winner's check was $5,600. It takes place at Spokane Country Club, which no longer exists, and you'll see a theme throughout these U.S. Women's Opens. Lots of courses that don't exist anymore. Lots of Wikipedia read for these courses. It's a bit of a tough start, but it's not like that now. So 2 LPGA founders and Patty Berg and Betty Jameson compete in the final in a 36-hole match play final. I put because we used to be a proper country because I think that would be sick
Hell
to go
yes,
back and
JP.
do. Like, what?
It's a long day at golf. I'm totally with you.
Oh yeah.
Don't make them like we used to.
Nope. So yeah, they had to fight for that $5,600. Okay. They had to work for it. So Patty Berg wins. She wins $5,600, and Betty Jameson wins the $3,100 second place prize, all in war bonds. Because this is 1946.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Both finalists, they win $100 for qualifying. So I guess like everybody in theory is winning money as they go through the bracket. So they won $100 for qualifying and were given various denominations for victories as they advanced through the bracket. And then the final match was worth $2,500. And here's the even funnier part. All of it comes from slot machines.
Sick.
What?
Yeah.
Like just
it's
local slot machines that somebody oversaw and ran, and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So weird. Unfortunately, this is about as prosperous as it gets for a little bit. The winner's share at the US Women's Open is substantially less in succeeding years, and it was not exceeded until 1972, 26 years later.
That's pretty crazy. So the initial purse was the highest it would be for the first 26 years of the
Yep.
event. Huh. Or the
Just
winner's share. Sorry, the total purse.
mm-hmm.
Huh. I also find it interesting. Had you asked me like where, even what like part of the country the
Never would have
first
guessed.
US would have women's open, yeah, like I would have guessed Northeast, maybe Southeast, maybe Midwest, getting over to like Pennsylvania, somewhere, Ohio,
Like
Chicago.
Chicago would be the
Yeah.
furthest west that I would ever
Yeah.
think.
Never would guess Spokane, Washington.
Nope.
That's really, really interesting.
Roots
Huh.
in the
This
PNW.
is one of those things. I don't. People can correct us. You continue to call it Spokane. I'm pretty sure it's Spokane, but who knows? I did do some research. Spokane Country Club. Okay, it's a long history. So that club was founded in 1898. It is now called the Kalispell Golf and Country Club. It was acquired in 2015 because I don't know exactly which tribe it was, but it sits on a native land. So they took it over in 2015, but it still sits there. Big. We should go play this thing.
That'd be really cool, honestly.
Throwback.
Yeah. Yeah. Get some hickories, go play it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right. All right, JP. Keep going. Good stuff.
All right, so we're not through this year. That was just me diving into the purse. The field has 39 women, and then they cut down to a 32 player match play bracket. There's a 36 hole qualifier on the first 2 days. 6 pros and 26 amateurs advanced to match play, which sounds crazy now, but there just wasn't a lot of professional golfers back then. All the top end talent, they were still playing as AMs. So
Yeah.
basically, I mean, I think the best way to kind of illustrate it is like almost like the Curtis Cup was the Solheim Cup when you think of the best players in the world going at each other and playing in team events. Like that's how you kind of had to think of it at the time. But 18 holes start the quarterfinals and then 36 holes for the semis and the finals, which is crazy.
It's real. We're playing real golf.
Playing
It's
real golf.
proper. I think that's the only way you can describe it.
For real. In the final match, Betty Jameson leads by 3 after 7 holes, but Patty Berg was the number 1 seed in qualifying, evened it up, and then they finished the first 18 holes all square. After their lunch break, Patty Berg needed only 14 holes in the afternoon to close out the match, 5-4. So pretty sick stuff. The win was later recognized as her 6th major championship out of her 15, which remains the most all time right now. No one's come close.
Hmm. I think, sorry, I should have interjected with this earlier, but I was going down a little rabbit hole while you were speaking. But it's fascinating that, you were talking about the Curtis Cup. The U.S. women's amateur has a much more robust history than the U.S. Women's Open. The amateur goes back to 1895. So there were women playing golf, obviously big competitions for women, but as I guess all sports, you had this weird like everybody wanted to remain amateur. That was such a thing. And then slowly, people started to turn professional and there was money involved, yada, yada. But yeah, just to go for like nearly 50 years between the start of the U.S. women's amateur and the start of like a proper U.S. women's open is such a long time. That's crazy.
And the flip-flopping of the prestige is really fascinating too, but I mean that's just a pillar in women's golf history and how it's progressed and how it's advanced. I wanted to get into Patty Berg a little more, and the
Oh,
more
it's phenomenal.
it's so cool. A lot of the backgrounds I would look into of a lot of these older champions were just like blew my mind. Like I learned so many random and wacky facts about a lot of champions, which I won't go into all of them. But Patty, I thought as our inaugural champion was worth diving into. She played quarterback for a rec football team, and right before she won the U.S. Women's Open, was a reservist in the Marines from 1942 to 1945. Before she'd enlisted, she shattered her knee in an accident and questioned whether she'd play golf again. That was a lot of the narrative that I was finding in newspapers, but ultimately she did, and then went on to be a founder of the LPGA and was also the first president. What a cool gal.
Yeah. I know. The breadth and width of what these people were up to, long ago, like it just I think it highlights the specialization in our society now, especially with our professional athletes.
Well,
But
big.
it's
I
really
remember
cool.
I remember we did like one of the little mini dives, and we did Patty one time. And I think, if I remember correctly, that so she's from Minnesota. I remember looking into trying to find more information about what she did in the Marine Corps Reserves. But another thing that I found in there, like while she's playing golf and serving her country and doing all this other stuff, in the wintertime, just being like a good Minnesota girl, she's also like a competitive speed skater. So she would just
Perfect.
be
So
like
sick.
out there, like playing quarterback in the fall, speed skating all winter long, and then like just beating people up on the golf course in spring and summer.
That's so awesome. I
The
love that.
duality of woman.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So let's get into 1947 because that's also an important year. Like I said, we're not going to go 1946 to 2025 each year, but we're I mean there are enough important years to call out, and both of them happen to be the first 2 years, or at least the first few years. So stick with me. Betty Jamieson comes back. She comes back with a vengeance and wins what's now a 72-hole stroke play event. So changing the format, no more 36-hole match play final. Very sad. I also forgot to include some advertising for the first U.S. Women's Open Championship. That was my bad. Mea culpa on that. Let me share a poster for the first one. You can kind of get an idea of what the branding was at this time for it. You'll notice something really interesting here. They don't call it the U.S. Women's Open. They call it the Women's National Open Golf Championship. I kept finding a lot of references for it being called that. This poster actually was signed by Patty Berg, which is cool, but this is such a cool piece of artwork. Like, I would love
Yeah.
to see a poster like this again.
Which begs the question for me: does the U.S. Open still produce an annual tournament poster? I wonder, because what a cool piece of merchandise memorabilia.
Right?
We'll have to get some
I
boots
just
on the
want to see.
ground reporting this week.
Yeah, seriously. Anyway, I hope they run something like this back because I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
Anywho, let's get into Betty Jamison's 1947 victory. Wins the 72-hole stroke play event now. If you remember Hope Sanis, who was one of the original founders of the WPGA, who's still running this event, her father's cotton fortune funds most of the purse this year. So again, just any effort to fund this championship. I mean, it's not like the sponsors were knocking on the door. Okay, had to find money somewhere. A player named Mary Sargent had like a really interesting qualifying story. I'm quoting this from Golf Digest. She said, or I'm sorry, the article says, she and Louise Suggs were paired and drove off in a near hurricane. A falling tree landed on Miss Sargent's drive, so she drove again, taking a 2-stroke penalty. Only after failing to qualify by a stroke did she discover that falling trees do not constitute natural hazards, and she could have lifted her ball for free. So that was really funny.
So she did not end up qualifying. She
Nope.
was SOL.
Nope.
Can you imagine the people today just accepting? Oh my! Tree fell on my ball. Nothing I can do. Gonna take my 2-shot penalty and re-hit.
Playing in a near
Yeah,
hurricane,
that's. I mean, what timing?
right?
Bad timing.
Bad timing. Anyway, let's get through the rest of the 40s, our WPGA era. Still, we're getting this off the ground, but we've got a lot of history that's starting to be made. Babe Zaharias begins kind of these dynasties. She wins by 8 shots in 1948 at even par. I found this interesting. This was like a weird fun fact. She missed a 5-foot putt on the last hole to lose $1,000. Apparently, a member of the club offered $1,000 to any of the 11 professionals in the field that scored less than 300. But the kicker is her winner's check was $1,200. So she could have doubled
Hmm.
that, essentially. Stinks.
God, I wonder if she was a little nervy over that putt.
Right?
Yeah.
Got the
I'll say
$1,000
this.
or anything.
Maybe we're gonna get there, but Babe Zaharias, I mean, you want to talk about Patty Berg being fascinating? Like Babe Zaharias is right there. She is incredible, and I think truly one of the best athletes of American history.
Totally. I like when one of these nights when I was researching for this, I went on such a deep Babe Zaharias dive, and I was like, "This is the U.S. Women's Open. I can't make this all about Babe Zaharias." But I did get some Babe Zaharias lore in here, so it doesn't quite end there.
Okay, all right, good.
Following year after she wins her first, is totally slaughtered. 14 shots a year after her first U.S. Women's Open. And then I kept seeing a lot of branding once again for this Women's National Open. I don't know what we were doing. I kept seeing U.S. Women's Open in newspapers too. I don't know. I applaud the WPGA and their early efforts to get this championship off the ground, but I kind of wish they had just stuck to one name.
Sure, that's fair.
Also in 1949, toasted at a course that no longer exists anymore. And once again, kept seeing the trends of Wikipedia Red and courses that no longer exist. Anywho, at the end of 1949, the WPGA is no longer. They go away. And they essentially have to forfeit the operation of this championship. But in 1950, we're moving on up. We found the LPGA, and the USGA takes over this championship. So big leagues. It's not for a couple years that the USGA doesn't take over. They don't take over until 1953. So in the interim, the LPGA is still, or I'm sorry, not the LP, not. The, I have mixed up my organizations. Lots of PGAs. We are saying the
It's fair.
WPGA loses it. The LPGA takes over in the interim until the USGA takes over in 1953.
Yeah, a lot of PGA. Yeah, that's Jordan. We won't hold that one against you.
Thank you. Sorry, it was a lot of word salad there. But 1950s, it's a decade of lots of operational changes, like I mentioned, some more dynasties, and then we lose Babe Zaharias in this decade, unfortunately, and then we are breaking barriers later on in the decade, which was incredible. But yeah, so got a few years of the LPGA taking it over. Betsy Rawls emerges in the formation of more dynasties. She wins her first in 1951. 1953, the USGA steps in. They are in charge. And like we mentioned, the US Women's Am was already a very established championship that they were running, but they want their goal is essentially to be the premier organization of running all of these open championships. And so they come in, they take over. In 1953, also, Babe Zaharias is not in the field. She's recovering from cancer. Babe Zaharias comes back in 1954 and wins by 12 strokes while wearing a colostomy bag, which is just crazy.
No, like truly crazy. Like truly imagine that today. Somebody in the field competing with that type of medical situation, and not only just playing, making it to a U.S. Women's Open, but to win by 12 shots.
Indeed.
It's so. Yeah, I just can't fathom it.
No. She would not defend her final major championship after a back surgery in 1955. They discover that her cancer had recurred near her sacrum, and she passes away in 1956 at the age of 45. So, like a very short but dominant run. And I mean, I can't believe she even competed through all of that. I mean, just probably one of the more stunning athletic feats of the past 100 years for sure.
And I will just say, we did another like very mini look at Babe's career when we were going through the LPGA founders, but just to kind of underscore, she Olympic gold medalist in both the 80-meter hurdles and the javelin. She was like an exceptional billiards player. She was a great basketball player, obviously a very good golfer. Played, I believe, pitched in Major League spring training games in the 1930s. Like, just incredible, the width and breadth of her athletic achievements. It's really unbelievable.
Don't forget, she also was a very good singer and played the harmonica.
Of course.
Sick.
Of course. Yeah.
No,
Did you
her run here though. So her first U.S. Women's Open victory came in 48. In 49, she was runner-up to Louise Suggs. In 50, you mentioned she did not play. She ends up coming back in 54. Obviously, there's just a ton of health stuff in here. It is phenomenal. The person that she was, just utter drive, determination, somebody taken from this world way too early, but man, what a lasting impact she left. Olympic gold medalist turned professional golfer, billiards, you name it. Like whatever she did it really damn good.
Yeah.
And LPGA founder.
Yep.
Yep.
And one, I think, credited 41-time winner on the LPGA Tour, like 10 official. It's unbelievable, and passes away at the age of 45. It's really amazing.
Yep.
Obviously, people know a lot too, but like just the amount of barriers that she broke down. First woman to compete in a PGA Tour event. People were mad as hell about that when she played in the LA Open, but it's awesome. She's a great person.
I couldn't remember how many years back, but she also tried to qualify for the U.S. Men's Open as well, and they wouldn't let her.
That's right.
So sick.
Yeah. I don't have. God, I feel like Anybody just if you want to go down a fascinating, again, like rabbit hole Wikipedia, just start reading about Babe. It's really unbelievable, all this stuff she
Unbelievable.
was into and accomplished.
Totally. So let's keep going through the 50s. Like I said, got so lost in the sauce of Babe's lore and her history, but definitely was important to spotlight as a part of this championship. So in 1955, we have our first international winner, who's Faye Crocker from Uruguay. And then in 1956, we have an amateur in an 18-hole playoff, which was so sick. They have so many of these like 18-hole playoffs throughout a lot of this championship's history, actually, which I just juiced me up reading. I loved that.
I truly think the 18-hole US Open playoff was one of like the most unique, and it just to me it separated the US Open, both men, women. Obviously, JP, you'll probably tell us when it went away for the women's, but that it's no longer a thing just disappoints me a little bit.
Same.
We used to be a proper country.
So more dynasties emerged. Like I mentioned earlier in the decade, Betsy Rawls won her first U.S. Women's Open in 1951. But between 1957 and 1964, Betsy Rawls and Mickey Wright win a combined 6 times. Very little parity at this time, but that's okay. I think that actually really helped this championship get off the ground. Their back and forth like often got characterized as a rivalry, but it was really friendly. They were cool. They would room together and they were friends. It was pretty friendly more than anything. They each individually win the US Women's Open 4 times and remain the winningest pair in championship history. Some have come close. Annika actually has come close. And they actually asked Betsy around that time in that era of when Annika was so dominant about her record being threatened. And she was quoted saying, a lot of times you ask a player about a record and they say, records are made to be broken. But I'd kind of hate to see my record broken. I kind of like holding on to that record, to be honest with you.
I like it. I dig it. Some
I'd
refreshing
say the
honesty.
same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want that to go away. I want my name right there.
Exactly. I know she's no longer with us, but I wonder if she's sweating Miss Yuka Sasso at all. Well, plenty of time to talk about Yuka, but yeah.
Plenty. So in 1956, this was a pretty monumental part of this championship as well. Anne Gregory is the first Black American woman to play in a USGA championship, playing at the U.S. Women's Amateur and the U.S. Women's Open. And that was only 2 years removed from Brown versus Board of Education and 8 years before the Civil Rights Act was passed. So that was a tremendous deal. In 1957, we have a little bit of a controversy. Jackie Pung is best known for the tournament she does not win. In 1957, they thought she beat Betsy Rawls by a stroke, and then they find out she signs for an incorrect score and was
Oh,
disqualified. She was actually paired with Betty Jamieson in the final round, and they thought they both made fives on the fourth hole when they actually had made sixes, even though both of them signed for the correct or that they for the score that they thought. They had the correct total score, but they had the wrong score on the fourth hole. They were still disqualified. Um, People were just mad, livid, so mad that this got taken away from Jackie. And I actually have some interesting photos from this scoring controversy. So you can see the scoreboard right there. Disqualified. It's
That's tough.
so shameful the way they've written this in chalk. I mean, geez.
So, yeah, what do you guys think about that? Where your total score, I guess it's just bad math, or it sounds like they didn't have like wrong scores on 2 holes, but maybe like she knew she shot it, but the math didn't add up. But she still signed for a total that was correct, but the individual holes, one of the hole scores was wrong. That's a tough beat. I don't
Yeah.
I feel like that's I don't know. Makes me think like, what are we really doing here?
I know. There's no malicious intent there if you're getting the total score right.
Yeah,
No.
it's part of the game. You're responsible for every
that's
box big, not just the
Yeah.
one at the end.
Yeah. But anyway, people are mad. They're mad as hell. They're so angry. And here's another photo.
Oh,
Poor
is that her?
Jackie.
Is that
Yeah,
her?
yeah.
Oh
Yeah. This
man.
is like one of like the
I mean,
honestly
that's
this
devastating.
very
Yeah, but
like
an incredible photo, and then you just
yes.
look at the lower left, and you're like, "Oh my goodness!"
This is so underrated of a sports photo. Like truly probably one of the most iconic pictures I've ever seen because you just have Betsy Rawls right there like with the hardware posing, so happy, and then you've just got Jackie at like the bottom left corner just looking so distraught, like she's the most upset she's ever been in her entire life.
Also, whoever the lady there from the USGA that's handing the award out looks mad as hell. Like she doesn't look like she's happy about this decision either. I'm glad to see they have law enforcement there in the background.
Good
There's a
move.
lot that you could take out of this photograph.
Oh my god,
It's
so much.
if
That
you
is
look
a
at the
great
lady
photo.
directly behind the USGA angry lady, it looks like she's like almost passing out. She's kind of slunched back in her chair. Just a lot.
Couldn't believe it.
No.
Stunned.
That
The
one
woman
lady
was too
kind of
stunned to speak.
sitting between Jackie and who ended up winning? Who was the winner?
Betsy Rawls.
Between Betsy and Jackie, she just looks calm as hell.
Yeah,
Like
she's
she's
chilling.
looking right at the camera. Yeah.
Oh, look
Poor
at these proud
Jackie.
all the proud members at the Wingfoot Golf Club in the background, which I'm sure you're going to tell us they gave them some money at the end. They were mad as hell. They got a little
Oh,
kitty
yeah.
together.
Yeah, oh yeah, no. The whole collective of angry folks, fans, officials, and the members of Wingfoot start collecting money for Jackie and they give her $3,000, which was more than the winner shared. So more than Betsy Rawls won.
Wow.
She
That's
only won
pretty cool.
$1,800 and Jackie walks away with $3,000, but no
They
US
were mad as
Open.
hell.
I'm
So
mad as hell.
in 57, we just said it's at Wingfoot. Obviously, a lot of USGA influence there once they finally take over the event. But these locations that they have in the 50s, because as we started out this history, we talked about clubs that no longer are around. But you have Wingfoot in 57. In 56, it was actually at Northland Country Club up in Duluth, which is sick. Like Northland hosting a U.S. Women's Open, I could see that. Salem Country Club is in there. Country Club of Rochester. Like, there's some really good courses that they started to get this at as soon as the LPGA and then USGA came on board.
Yep. And I think, like I said, just forming these dynasties and like the lack of parity actually at the time, I think really ended up kind of boosting the profile of this event.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I want to conclude this controversy by including Betsy's response, who is ultimately the champion of 1957. She says, quote, "I felt very bad for Jackie. It was a terrible way to lose. But then again, rules are rules.
God, Betsy sound like
Yeah.
a killer.
God, I need to look at Betsy.
Like stone cold. I
She
don't
had
want my
the
record
best
broken.
quotes.
Yeah, I don't like that. Jackie, tough shit. Rules are rules. Yeah. All right, Betsy, I see you.
Just epic. Like, truly. Like, not one to mince her words.
Tough little footnote on Jackie. She would not go on to win the U.S. Women's Open at any point, and she would not win a major. This was like truly, her one good shot, which kind of makes it even tougher in retrospect.
Yeah. That picture cuts even deeper, honestly, knowing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's round out the 50s. Mickey Wright ends this decade winning her first 2 major championships. She's second in all-time wins, I should note. She has 82 behind Kathy Whitworth's 88, and second in major championships with her 13 behind Patty Berg's 15. And yeah, like kind of going back to what you said, Cody, like we were really upping the ante on venues, but this believe this was 1959. It was hosted at another course that does not exist anymore, unfortunately. So yeah, we're kind of flip-flopping. We're going to some more prestigious venues, but then kind of running it back at some places that who knows if they end up existing decades beyond them.
Well, I do have some positive news here. So 59 was held at Churchill Valley Country Club in Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
All right. It closed down sometime in the 2010s. I think 2013, it says this door shut, but they saved it. They converted it into a green space big. So it's a walking path, beautiful wildflowers, everything.
Yeah, I like
Cart
that.
paths still in use, bridges, you and your pup, you want to go out there, play. Good on them. At least it's not some condos or anything
Yeah.
else out there.
That's a happy ending. I like that.
Mhm.
I don't know if
All
we're
right.
gonna. I assume are we gonna get more into Mickey Wright? She's another just like OG.
OG, yeah. Get a little bit
Yeah.
more into Mickey Wright.
Okay.
Are we ready for the 60s?
Of course.
All right. Purses are increasing. This is still a little bit into Mickey Wright and Betsy Rawls and their dominance. We're changing the schedule a little bit, and then we're finally on TV. So 20 years into this championship, we make it on television, which is very exciting. So
Okay.
let's start with 1960. Betsy Rawls, again, she's back, wins her 4th and final U.S. Women's Open, and then becomes LPGA president in 1961. So pretty good career for Betsy, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love her as president. She's probably great. Called it
I
like she
think
saw it.
so. This is what did you say? 1960 or
Yeah.
61?
In 60, she won her last U.S. Women's Open. 61, she becomes president.
Yeah. Which I think I'm only I'm doing the math. She would have been 32, 33 years old at this time. Honestly, a little surprised this was her last US Open. I would have thought
No, it
maybe some
wasn't. It was her
more,
last U.S. Open win. She played in 61. She was
Yeah.
runner-up. Could you imagine the sitting commissioner of the LPGA Tour rocking up and be like, "Yeah, I'm here to play. Like I'm still in this."
But
and
that's
then
what they were doing.
competing.
They
I
were
love it.
doubling
I love it.
up. It was
Could have been Stacey
awesome.
Lewis.
Exactly.
It
Which
was
honestly, I
awesome.
thought there was a really good chance of that happening.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, JP. Keep going.
No apologies. I love this. 61. Let's continue on. They just kind of get beat up at Baltusrol, like beat up. The cut is plus 24. But
We
Mickey
used to
Wright.
play proper golf
We
tournaments.
used to play proper golf tournaments. We used to. Mickey Wright back, wins her 3rd U.S. Women's Open. 1963. So I'm going 2 years ahead. Althea Gibson plays the U.S. Women's Open 3 years after she retires from professional tennis. So thought that was a cool cameo. 1964, Mickey Wright wins her 4th and final U.S. Women's Open in a playoff versus Ruth Jessen. And this concludes the Rawls and Wright era, which was just crazy, truly. To win 6 times between the both of them in that condensed amount of time. I mean, I don't think we would ever experience something like that again, honestly.
No, and I guess I'm just also a little surprised that Mickey was still in her 20s when she won her last U.S. Women's Open. Like you said, it was just a ton of winning and not like a very long, wide amount of time.
Nope. Just crazy. I also found footage of 64. That was the earliest I could find, and I thought it kind of felt like I was watching it like right out of like a little viewfinder that I had as a kid, like the little red ones that I'm looking through. It was wild. But speaking of being able to watch U.S. Women's Opens, in 1965, the U.S. Women's Open is nationally televised for the first time. The final round is shown on TV. We also have a schedule format change and a purse increase. So this was the first U.S. Women's Open scheduled for 4 days since 1952, with the final round on Sunday. But from 1953, fun fact, through 1964, so this was the year before we're finally on TV, the third and the fourth rounds were both played on Saturday. And the US Open also moved its final round to Sunday in 1965.
Huh. Interesting.
The purse goes up substantially. The winner share goes up to $4,000, up from $2,200 in 1964. And the purse goes up to $17,780, up from $10,010 in 1964. So we're moving on up. We're elevating, guys. We are getting somewhere.
But we're not at a total purse equal to that very first 1946 National Women's Open, interestingly.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of back to where we started.
Sorry. Total purse has gone up, but the winner share is still less.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, going to 1967, this was crazy. Catherine Lacoste becomes the only amateur to ever win the U.S. Women's Open. She has a 5-stroke lead after 36 and 54 holes. And even though she shot a 79 in the final round, she held on and won by 2 strokes over Susie Maxwell and Beth Stone. This was also the first win by an amateur on the LPGA Tour, but this is kind of a one and done thing. She just apparently really likes amateur golf. And if her name sounds familiar, she's the daughter of Renee Lacoste, the tennis player who founded the Lacoste brand.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I don't know this as a fact, but my guess would be maybe they had enough money. She didn't feel the need to turn pro, perhaps. Yeah.
Nope. She said, never mind. Nope.
Huh. Still the only French woman to win the U.S. Women's Open as well.
Yeah. So 60s gets a little quieter. In 68, we have a winner who postponed her honeymoon just to win the U.S. Women's Open in Susie Maxwell Burning. And then in 1969, I thought this was interesting. Donna Caponi won, but it was like 108 degrees in Pensacola, Florida, which sounds like the worst thing anyone could ever go through. So shout out Donna. And that concludes the 60s.
Pensacola sounds
yeah.
I joke Pensacola. Yeah.
All right. Moving on. Let's get into the 70s. A lot of notable winners, not too much in terms of like crazy championship history in terms of, purse changes or, format or whatever, but there's still some things of note that happen. Donna Capote comes back and wins in the 1970s, so she goes back to back in 69 and 70. Joanne Carner, who many of us know as being an amateur queen, she won her first U.S. Women's Open. Nancy Lopez. Okay, Nancy Lopez is so interesting in the context of the U.S. Women's Open. And you guys are smiling, and I feel like you guys know why, but gosh, I love the Nancy Lopez lore as it pertains to the U.S. Women's Open.
I'm smiling because I truly don't know it. I'm excited.
You don't know it? Okay.
I don't think so.
All right. Well, in 1975, she's an amateur, and she contends this year. Just buckle up. Joanne Carter comes back, wins her second U.S. Women's Open in 1976. Hollis Stacy wins her first of 3 in 77 over Nancy Lopez and comes back, wins again. Purse is finally in the 6 figures in 78. So sorry, I should have mentioned that there was actually a substantial change. Our purse hit 6 figures in 1978.
That's big. That's huge.
All right, that rounds out the 70s. 80s gets a little crazy, and we're getting a little popular too.
Did I miss when are we doing the Nancy Lopez stuff? I feel like we breezed past that. Or are you just
No,
setting
the
this up for
Nancy
more
Lopez
later?
stuff continues. Oh, it
Okay.
continues. Yeah, we're
All
not
right.
done
So
with
just
Nancy yet.
hold tight there.
Hold
Okay.
tight. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. 1980, we kick off. Amy Alcott wins her only U.S. Women's Open. In 1982, we set an attendance record. I didn't have a note for that, but there's many years that I'd found that we were setting attendance records. But we're getting popular. More people are interested in women's golf in 1980, which is awesome. And we'll kind of see the fruits of that come about in the 90s specifically. But we're making moves. We're getting somewhere. 1984, Hollis Stacy wins her third U.S. Women's Open. 1986, guys, this one was okay. This one was specifically chaotic. There's just a lot of weird stuff that happened that week, other than the fact that it ended in a Monday playoff. Just strange week. So I found this article from Jaime Diaz, and basically what happens is Tuesday of that week, during the practice round, a railroad tanker loaded with phosphorus derailed in Miamisburg, which was a city about 10 miles southwest of the course. When the tank ruptured, its contents ignited and a white plume of noxious smoke rose into the air, leading to the evacuation of 30,000 people, the largest evacuation as a result of train derailment in U.S. history. Several golfers had to change hotels because of the irritating fumes, which lingered for days. Unquote.
Huh.
Not good.
No, that's not good.
I bet you couldn't guess what state this happened in, Randy. Where do trains derail at?
Well, I know Ohio's had their fair share.
It's Ohio, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God. What are we doing?
What are we doing?
You tell us.
Yeah, well, not good.
Not good. Not good. So, other than poisonous smoke, we had flies. We had a lot of I don't know if they were flesh eating. I mean, it seems like that was the implication. But we just had a lot of really annoying flies. So, Ayako Okamoto said she lost a shot on the 12th hole that Friday when a fly bit her on the leg as she was trying to chip. Her interpreter and business manager said, Ayako says the flies here eat you. So, some really pesky flies.
That's tough. God, just when you're making the stroke to get bit by a big ass fly. It's tough. They're rubbing the green stuff.
Maybe they were related to the smoke. I don't know.
No.
Just annoying stuff. So, it doesn't end there. That Saturday of the championship, there's an earthquake at 4:20 in the morning. The quake was felt in 4 states and measured a 4.2 on the Richter scale. Just weird stuff. Then 3 hours later, a security guard at the course skids and crashes his motorcycle into the scoreboard in the press tent.
What?
And then there's a thunderstorm later in the day, and there was a cart that was supposed to bring Ayaka Okamoto back to shelter, which skidded and smashed into a tree. She hurts her head, hurts her thigh. Didn't seem too serious, but enough to be noted in this article. I thought this quote was great. She was more scared than when she saw Poltergeist 2.
So our poor girl, she got bit by a giant fly that she thought were like, flesh eating. And then she gets slammed into a tree while riding on a cart
Yep.
when the
Poor
thunderstorm
Ayako.
comes through. That's a tough day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All in Kettering, Ohio at the NCR Country Club, which is kind of Southwest Ohio. It's like Dayton area. So I'll own this. I apologize.
Thank you.
This is
Thank
on
you. That's
me.
big of you.
Big of
Yeah.
you. Yeah. I want to talk about Pat Bradley, who's the best player in the world at this time. And there is like a really sick quote that she says about just being goated. She goes, I guess they're talking about Greg Norman and how good he is at the time and just making parallels and comps and things of the like. So they ask her and they compare her to Greg Norman. And she says, Yeah, but he lost 3 of the 4 majors. I won them. So sick.
Okay. All right, Pat.
Well,
We
you got to
see you.
understand too, like she wasn't just like good. 86 was her. That's the year that she almost won the Grand Slam.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure. Okay, so this is the only tournament that she didn't win that year. If I remember correctly, she won Women's PGA Championship. She won the ANA, Dynashore, whatever it's called at the time, Chevron, and then won the Canadian Open as well. That was also professional. My one of my favorite things about Pat Bradley is that her ultimate, like, just utter refusal to travel over for the Women's Open. Never played in the Women's Open. So in her world, there's only 4 majors, and she won 3 of them, was going for the 4th here at the US Open. And she finished like top 10 or something like that, right? I mean, she was up there. It wasn't like she was
T5.
out of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
T5. She was very much in this thing, but she was like the boss.
The
It's
boss.
incredible when you look at it.
Yep. She was the money leader. She also had a lucky number 13 on her license plate, and she would only use golf balls numbered 1 or 3. Yeah, she just was a dog. So good that year. And yeah, like you said, this was the only major that she didn't win that year. Jane Geddes had won in 1986. So just was a dog, but I love that quote. I thought that was so sick.
Well, and Cody, back to Pat Bradley not traveling over for the women's British, like it wasn't a major then, you know? So it's like, why am I
True.
going to go over there just to play? I think it wasn't even. I think in '94 it got co-sanctioned for the LPGA. So yeah, it was
Right.
just kind of in the wilderness at that point.
Yep.
So I go to Canada. That's far enough.
Exactly.
Yep. All right, let's move on to 1987. Laura Davies wins her first major in an 18-hole Tuesday playoff. We had tremendous delays this year. Massive rain delays caused a 6-day event, and the tournament ends technically on Monday. This is also referred to as the longest ever U.S. Women's Open.
So Laura Davies, first English woman to win the U.S. Women's Open, and I do find it interesting up until this point. So going back 1946, it just completely dominated by American women. You had
Yep.
Faye Crocker in 1955 won it. We mentioned Catherine Lacoste in 67. Australia, Jan Stevenson won in 1983, and then Laura Davies in 1987. But just and it will get a lot more international winners kind of going forward. But man, the first like 40 years of the event where America had it on. Yay us. We had it on lockdown.
On lock, totally. Yeah, that was significant. So at that point, really only 3 international champions through 1987, which is so crazy. Let's wrap up the 80s. Let's wrap up the 80s and get into the 90s. It continues to get more fun. Betsy King wins and becomes the first player in LPGA history to exceed $500,000 in earnings for a single season.
That's
Big money.
significant. Good for her.
Big money.
I believe Nancy Lopez finished runner-up again to Betsy King this year in
We're
1989.
getting to Nancy. We're getting to Nancy.
Okay.
I promise.
All
I
right.
promise.
We're
I
teasing
promise.
them. It's a
But
long tease.
thank you. Thank you for
Okay.
noting that. 1990s. We get a lot more TV time. Some weird ones kind of end up in the mix too. We're continuing to play better venues, and then we see the emergence of Annika, and we see more money.
So Betsy King goes back to back 89, 90. Yeah, take us into the 90s. Where do you want to drill into here?
I want to start at 1991. This one gets a little out of pocket, but this one's at Colonial. So let's go first off. Let's note that there's a tremendous purse increase. Meg Mallon wins $110,000 out of a $600,000 purse, which was an increase of 30% over the previous year in 1990, and double that of just 4 years earlier. So that's important to note. And then there's a really funny slow play controversy in the first round. So while playing the 14th hole. Very notorious, outspoken. I put like bad girl just for fun, but she was just a very outspoken person. Lori Garbisi has her caddy go to the closest payphone to order a large pepperoni and mushroom Domino's pizza that she wanted delivered to the 17th tee. So she's ordering this on the 14th hole, wants it to get to her by the time she makes it to the 17th tee.
Okay.
Pizza was waiting for her by the time she gets to 17T, where she shares it with her playing partners and the group ahead of her that was still waiting on the tee. She was quoted saying, "I was just trying to make a statement. The round took 5 hours and 20 minutes."
5:20. God, that'd
Mhm.
be, that's kind of flying by today's
By
standards
today's
sometimes.
standards, right? I was
Yeah.
like, oh, can you imagine Lori today?
No. And if there was a player who would order pizza to the golf course, I think first pick, I'm taking Charlie Hall to do something like
That's
this.
exactly what I was thinking. I'm calling on Charlie to do this too. If she wants to make a
Yeah.
statement about her disdain for slow play, she will order a pizza.
That's great. I love that.
So sick.
1991 U.S. Women's Open held at Colonial Country Club in Fort Worth, Texas, July 11th through the 14th. I can
Oh.
only imagine how steaming hot that
Swampy.
was.
Oh,
Yep.
God.
Just, I want none of that.
No. Yeah. No, thank you.
We don't get out of July for a while, by the way. So lots of hot U.S. Women's Opens to continue. I think about some of these in the context of like scorching hot temperatures or just weird stuff like Laura Davies winning in a Tuesday playoff, and I'm like, you should probably have half a U.S. Women's Open attached so that you're winning 1.5 instead of 1, just for whatever you've had to go through that week. Certainly, I
Yeah.
think Colonial in the middle of July would qualify as well.
Weirdly, I was thinking as the men were just at Colonial, what a great golf course that would be for an annual LPGA stop, right? Like I
For
would love to
sure.
watch the women play around Colonial. Just
Totally.
not in July. Yeah,
No.
we're good there.
Or late August. Remember when what was the Dallas LPGA event? Volunteers of America. They just
Oh, yeah.
struggled
Yeah.
kind of finding a home for it.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, why not? And there's a rich history at Shady Oaks as well that's right up the road from Colonial.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because there's such a big rivalry. Maybe the Colonial members that listen to our podcast will get a hair up their ass or something like that and be scared and jump on it. Plus, new LPGA commissioner from Dallas.
Right, Dallas boy. Yeah.
You don't
yeah,
know.
Yeah.
Just not in July or August, please.
Yeah. Hope he's listening. Listen good. All right. 92. Patty Sheehan defeats Julie Inkster, who also has an interesting lore with this championship, in an 18-hole Monday playoff at Oakmont. This was considered the second longest setup in U.S. Women's Open history. Sheehan's victory is notable because she blew a 9-shot lead just 2 years before in 1990. So she comes back with a little bit of vengeance on her own. I love this theme of vengeance and comebacks and returns in the U.S. Women's Open. I think that's a pretty cool through line here. So shout out
Yeah.
Patty for getting it done.
Shout out Patty, and shout out to a name that's going to become pretty regular here coming up. It's the first U.S. Open appearance for an amateur named Annika Sorenstam, 21 years old at the time. Made the cut on the number at +9, finished at 24 over, tied for 64th. But it's Annika's season. It's starting.
It's Hanukkah season. It's Hanukkah season. It's the 90s. 1994, we have a single round record set by Helen Alfredson at 63. This is also the first year that the U.S. Women's Open is on both ESPN and ABC. So getting some primetime coverage. I love it.
Yeah, 63 doing work. Good on Helen. And I feel like, guys, this is where I kind of pick up some very hazy, vague, just U.S. Women's Open memories. My grandma was a huge golf fan. Like, I feel like I probably started watching some U.S. Women's Open around this time when it was ABC, ESPN.
Please insert any personal history because that like hypes me
Well, I
up.
don't have anything specific yet. But I guess when we get to Annika, it's like just like vague enough memories where I'm like, yeah, I'd probably watch that, but I don't have any like super specific yet.
I guess what we learned there, Big, is that coverage matters. If you're able to
Yeah, I
get in
know.
front of the eyes of a little Phil, you never know who you're going to get to pick up the game.
And I mean, ESPN, ABC, God, I feel like we kill for some of that now,
For sure.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, let's run that back. I hope the right people are listening. We want the right people to listen a ton today. So let's jump in 95. ESPN still has the rights, but for the first time, the U.S. Women's Open airs on NBC. Also significant, we have the first 7-figure purse in event history, which is double that of 1990. So not only is the purse increasing, but it's increasing more substantially in quicker segments. So just awesome how much the championship has grown, especially the 90s and all the momentum. And like, once again, I feel like almost that lack of parity. I mean, again, there's so much more parity than there was in the 50s and 60s at the start of the championship. But like, you're seeing more familiar faces, you're branding around popular women's golfers. I mean, and like we said, coverage matters. And so people are ponying up the money, and that's great. We don't have to ask for our dad's cotton fortunes or for slot machines to fund purses. So we're moving on up.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. A good point about just when you have familiar names that are kind of going back and forth, winning, going back to back. I do feel like it makes it much more appealing from like a marketing standpoint. It's not like a random winner every year.
Totally. Also thought this was significant. This starts a dialogue on pregnancy in sports. The low-am this year and the 7th place finisher are both pregnant. And just notably, this is 1995. This was 2 years after the LPGA opened their daycare program. So it kind of just opens up longer timelines for women's careers. They don't have to shelve their careers. They can still manage motherhood and being an athlete at the same time. So that's pretty progressive as well. And to cap that off, Annika wins her first U.S. Women's Open.
Big year. Yeah.
Huge year.
This would be, the Annika train is barreling down the tracks.
Barreling.
And this was out in my neck of the woods at the Broadmoor out here in Colorado Springs.
Yes, I should have mentioned that. Yes, at the Broadmoor, that is where she gets her inaugural U.S. Women's Open title, which is very significant because I mean she has one of the most dominant runs ever in this championship, and I mean came close to matching that of the 4. Ultimately ends up with 3. Sorry, spoiler alert. I kind of let that one run there, but yeah, just truly one of the most winningest players to play in a U.S. Women's Open, and would get her second in 1996. Also following that Annika hype, the purse becomes the biggest in women's golf and surpasses that of the LPGA Championship.
It's really interesting, this time frame. Annika obviously would do so much for Swedish golf and women's golf. Not to spoil, but 1998 we get Sairi Pak, who obviously has done so much for Korean golf, and then in between in 1997, a completely, I'll say, random winner, England's Alison Nicholas, who I say random. Not only is this her only major championship, but she never finished in a top 10 in another major championship. This was a true kind of outlier for her, and just a kind of a funny random name to be sandwiched between Annika and Sairi Pak.
Now, finally, Big, you know who finishes right behind her?
I don't.
Nancy Lopez.
Oh, poor Nance.
Nancy. Yup. So this is the 4th time Nancy finishes second, and this is the most disappointing of all of them. She at 40, she came as close as she ever had to winning the U.S. Women's Open. Yes, so she loses to Alison Nicholas. She had a downhill birdie putt, 15 feet, goes past the final hole while Nicholas sinks a 3-footer for par to win. Yeah, I just probably one of the biggest disappointments of her career because it was the one major that she came close that many times to winning and just couldn't do it. I mean, she'd been poking her head at this since 1975 when she was an amateur and finished second place. So, I mean, imagine just having a championship like that on your consciousness for like 22 years being like the one thing you're chasing and a matter of that like just by a hair you miss the final putt to lose to, no offense to Alice and Nicholas, a slight rando.
Yeah. God, I didn't realize Nancy was, kind of the Phil Mickelson of the women's side when it comes to the U.S. Open. But you're right, 4 runners up there, and actually 3 runner ups at the Du Maurier, another major that she never won. I mean, she left some on the table.
Totally.
Which is
I'd also
wild.
like to know she was the first player to ever shoot 4 rounds in the 60s in the US Women's Open. So
Huh.
like theoretically, she like really deserved this. Like should have got one at some point. I mean, just couldn't make it happen. So, yeah, heartbreaking stuff, truly.
That's a great little tidbit. First woman to shoot in the 60s. I like that.
Yep. All right, we're in the late 90s. 1998, as you mentioned earlier, Sayri Pak, one of the most, transformative wins in the history of this event because it starts an entire movement in South Korea and inspires so many women and girls to take up the game. Sayri Pak wins in a 20-hole Monday playoff. Crazy stuff. Guys, I wish we had more of these like Monday, even if Laura Davies want to run back to this Tuesday playoff, but that's just so crazy and cool. I don't know. I mean, I love more golf, but like just in the context of the championship lasting that long, because I mean, I always get to Sunday and it's like you wake up and you're like, oh, there's 18 holes left. Oh, today's gonna be so great, but then you just know it's so disappointing. It's so bittersweet. And so knowing how spoiled these people were, getting so many Monday finishes, I'm a little jealous.
So 98, this was a U.S. Open I very specifically remember watching. I can definitively say I was watching this Sunday round from Black Wolf Run. I remember Kohler, kind of that whole area was really just coming online as a interesting golf destination. Obviously, Sayri Pak, but I think I'm gonna mispronounce her last name, but she defeated an amateur, Jenny Chazariporn. I apologize. I'm sure I mispronounced that. I find it fascinating. Jenny was at Duke University at the time, would return to Duke University after losing in a playoff to Sayri Pak, one of the GOATs of women's golf, would help the Blue Devils to win an NCAA title in 1999, but never made it, never really cracked it in professional golf after that. I mean, she would go around playing some mini tours, but never established on the LPGA tour. I don't think played in another major. Certainly, I didn't make a cut, let alone come anywhere close to that 1998 performance. Her brother was caddying for her. I mean, this was a true like Cinderella story that I'm sure I didn't appreciate at the time. But with the now being 27 years on, like God, what a unbelievably potentially life-changing moment that this was for Jenny.
Yeah, struggled. She turned professional, bounced around mini tours, ultimately like just hated the mini tour life, didn't like professional golf at all. And I remember when they went back in like the mid 2010s or something like that, I think they invited her back to the championship for something and she turned it down. And they found out that
Huh.
she was like went to nursing school after playing professional golf for a little bit and trying to make it, and is just like living her life and was a nurse. So completely moved on. But you're right, Big. Forever Black Wolf Run, those images, every time they would talk about Whistling Straits, I always, the first image that comes to my mind is Black Wolf Run. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until the Ryder Cup and we were there a couple years ago that like now I have these new Whistling Straits memories. But still, when I think of Kohler in that area, it defaults back to that Sayri Pak drive in the water, drop situation, brother caddying for the amateur, and like this whole event. It's such a lasting memory for me as well.
Unfortunately, I just made it to this earth, so like I have no recollection of this major championship, but it sounds like it was sick.
Yeah, it was a great championship. Yeah. It, there was just a video produced all about more from like Sayri Pak's perspective, but on this 1998 U.S. Open. If you search YouTube, I forget if it was the LPGA that produced it or the USGA, but some really good kind of look backs and deep dives into this championship for anybody interested.
I just can't imagine also going to the hospital and then you find out the nurse that's treating you is won an NCAA championship and also almost won the US Women's Open.
Yeah,
Like,
I know.
I think I would be really startled and then I'd ask like, "Get back out there. What are you doing in here?"
Yeah. I am always fascinated by those people that kind of have amateur success, close calls, and then are able to like, you know what, that put that chapter of my life behind me, and I'm going to go in a totally different direction. That's really fascinating.
Which,
There's a theme here of women being good at so many things.
yeah, exactly. I got to go back and dig some more stuff up against about this U.S. Women's Open too, because I remember the first two rounds, like the winning score, I think they finished at 6 over is what they got to the playoff with, but there was plenty of people under par the first two rounds, and then something happened. I don't know if it was weather or wind. I remember it just being like overcast and rainy too. But
Hmm.
everybody shot super high in the third round to set up the final round there. So fascinating. That championship changed the lives of so many people. So many people. And both men's and women's golf outside of our continent, really, and I would say of greater Europe, like had this explosion that I don't think like we talk about it, but I don't think we even know the true context of like what actually happened there. It's phenomenal. And we were able to go over to Korea a couple of years ago and just see that part of it. And there's so much more that's still left to explore, but everybody goes back to that date, which is so cool.
Yeah. I'm just looking on YouTube, the USGA, you can watch this entire final round, plus the entire playoff on YouTube from Black Wolf Run. That's available. And yeah, like I said, there are many videos kind of breaking down Sayri Pak. But Cody, you're exactly right. Like we're still living in the tail of consequences from Sayri Pak and what this championship was.
Yep.
All right, let's round out the 90s with another person who had a ton of close calls but actually got it done. Julie Inkster in 1999 wins her first US Women's Open on her 20th attempt.
Hmm.
Becomes the oldest champion since 1955. It wouldn't end there. She would pop up a little bit later, but yeah. You want to talk Nancy chasing it? Julie was hunting too.
Yeah, I feel
Hey.
like Julie though has, Nancy. I feel like had outside of her PGA Championship wins, and she won everything else. Like the majors truly did not happen for her, and at least for Julie, she had the majority of them under her wing already. And I know this like is really when she started picking up majors in a tight clip. Talking about U.S. Women's Open here. She's going to win another U.S. Women's Open. She won PGA Championship the same year. We'll go back to back for the Women's PGA Championship. Canadian, the Demorier in 84. Like it feels like for some reason you can't compare the two because Nancy just had so many close calls that should have happened. Like truly the Phil Mickelson character.
Mm.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, and what just like prestigious names? I don't know if it's a product of I was just a certain age, but God, it just seems like this time frame is just littered with like very important women in the history of like the LPGA and women's golf.
Yeah.
I just, you know, I, I guess we'll need another 20 years to look back on like the current time to really understand, how many Hall of Famers. But yeah, it just seems like a lot of these women winning here in this it's like, oh yeah, no, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer. And then it's like, I, you look at the current tour and it's, yeah, I think there are going to be some Hall of Famers like Nelly, but you don't know until, we're going to need another 10, 15, 20 years to really look back and be like, oh yeah, no, it was either chock full of them or maybe not.
Yeah, you don't know. And I mean, we don't know, right? Like, it's so interesting to see like the waves of parody and then it just kind of tightening up into this girls' club of people who are, picking them off one by one. And it ebbs and flows in such an interesting way. And yeah, I mean, that kind of was the 90s. But again, we're going to primetime coverage. We kind of need that. Like, that's, if you want to elevate women's golf at large and the most important major championship that it has, like, yeah, you need some familiarity, you need some consistency, and it was nice to see that it happened, and it actually continues for a little bit longer too,
Well,
past the
I
90s.
guess just to put some detail on this, like starting in 1990, right, the beginning of this decade, Betsy King wins. She's a Hall of Famer. 34 LPGA career victories. You go to Meg Mallon, who won 18 times, is a World Golf Hall of Fame member. You go to Patty Sheehan. We've talked about her, but she won 35 times on the LPGA tour. To Annika, obviously, we know her story. Sayri Pak, Julie Inkster. We're gonna get to Kari Webb. Like this is just a murderer's row of
Yep.
several different women who had outstanding careers. Yeah, I just, getting runs like that, we just don't quite have that now, I think. Which I guess speaks to more parity, I would guess.
Yeah, but also I know we bounce between World Golf Hall of Fame and the real LPGA Hall of Fame. And the fact that like the selection and how you get into them is such starkly different is that I want us to remember this because we go back and we applaud the LPGA and how their points-based system works, but also being able to throw for some of these people, yeah, they're a Hall of Fame member. It does elevate it. And I think that's one of the things where we start to look at big, like you said, like if you look at today's current day setup, like people aren't going to get the points that have won multiple majors, that have
Yeah.
done a ton to grow their game. I think Anna Northquist, she's going to go down as a multiple major champion, Solheim Cup captain, Solheim Cup stalwart, changed the game, really was the in a horrible, a difficult spot being pretty much supposed to be the next Annika and did it and lived it, through the yips and everything. And she will not she's not going to be in the Hall of Fame, which I think there's discussion to be had of
I think that's absolutely right, Cody.
Yeah.
That's very interesting whether they need to look at either doing away with the points, lowering the threshold. I hadn't really thought about that, but you're exactly right. Because
I mean, yeah, because there's an argument
it
to be
is
made
going to
relative
create a
to skill,
perception.
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
it's gotten harder to do.
Huh.
Anyway, let's get back
But
to
it
it.
does, the women now who are able to reach that threshold, I think it underscores like how freaking good they are.
Yep.
Yes.
Which, Lydia Ko, like that deserved to be like really celebrated last year.
100%. Very much.
Totally. Totally. All right. We ready to get into the new millennium, guys?
Yes.
All right. You mentioned her already, but Kari Webb, this is the emergence of Kari Webb. 2000, she starts winning Her first of 2 consecutive U.S. Women's Opens. She also gets to take home a good amount of money. We have a massive purse increase this year. It's 2.75 million with a winner's check of 500,000, which was over 57% from 1999. So just fitting prize for a fitting champ. I should also note she got a bonus, a $250,000 bonus for winning 2 majors in a year. She had won the Kraft Nabisco earlier that year. So that's a nice little take home. Also, very annoying to read this in my research. The 2000 US Women's Open took place at the same time as the Men's British Open, which I'm sure you can imagine. Literally, the 2000 Men's British Open, probably where the viewership was.
Yeah.
And and totally underscores just how good Kari Webb was and how significant winning that championship was. Yeah, so disappointing to read. Going back to like our conversation about GOATs and Hall of Famers and just incredible players winning these US Women's Opens, Kari Webb's run, I honestly had so much FOMO reading about. And I did during the British Open, the Women's British Open as well. But like when I started researching for the US Women's Open, I'm like, oh my gosh, what an era. Truly.
Yeah, everybody says Kari is really fun on the course, off the course. I think a ton of personality. I think she's somebody that would make a great podcast guest if we could track her down one day, because I'm sure she's got all the stories.
Track her down, big. Do you remember? This is a little behind the curtain action, but she was actually
No, I do. Yeah.
She was actually with Marina last year when I can't remember if it was US Women's Open or maybe KPMG. But
I know, I forget. Yeah.
we had Marina and Jane on the halfway through live show. And Kari was like there in the background, and we were trying to convince her to be like, just come on the live show, just come on, please do it. And she's like, I can't, I don't want to do it. I've had a couple
Yeah.
glasses of wine. I don't want to.
We were like, even better.
Right,
Come on,
please.
come on.
But you're
Fuck
right.
yeah.
I mean, that would be we got to hunt that one down big.
Yeah, there are quite a few here that we that's going to be our goal. End of this year, next year, we got to get some of these goats and legends on talking their experiences and careers.
I hope this run through is inspiring the list. I hope the list is growing.
No, truly.
Sick. All right. Back to Kari. In 2001, she wins at Pine Needles, 8 shots over Sayri Pak for the largest margin in championship history. And I put a note in my notes saying if like I could go back in time and experience a US Women's Open in real time, it would have been that one for sure.
Really?
What makes you say that? Just the 2 names there on top, or
that was a lot of it, but it's like, how do you do that, especially with how elevated the talent had become, defending your title at that venue? I was so impressed by that. And how much coverage exists of it, I don't know. I actually did not get to dive into that, but if I could experience it in real time, whether that would be as a fan on site or just watching the whole thing, like truly, I think that was the one I would have picked.
Well, super impressive. Kari, you said won by 8. She was the only player under par. She finished at 7 under. Sayri Pak was +1. The top, like, what is it, 5 names on this final leaderboard? Obviously, Kari Webb, Sayri Pak, Dottie Pepper finished 3rd. Katrina Math
Shout out.
finished tied for 4th with Christy Kerr and Sherry Turner, who was a major champion in her own right. So yeah, JP, you could do a lot worse. This was a stacked and packed U.S. Women's Open here at Pine Needles.
Stacked. I also invite the both of you to call out any championships you either wish to relive or wish you would have experienced in real time as well, because I think that's fun. It's fun to have a little FOMO.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll keep it going, and we'll call some stuff out here.
Heck yeah. All right. Let's get to 2002 because there was an important championship change. We changed the way that we are qualifying for the U.S. Women's Open. So we're going to 2 stages now, 18 holes for local qualifying and 36 holes for sectional. This year, Julie Inkster's back. She wins again, 2 strokes over Annika, who was the 54-hole leader. She also joins Babe Zaharias as the only 2 women to win 2 majors after 40. So that's a cool club to be in. That's honestly pretty awesome.
That is sweet.
Yeah.
Also, I want to say
Julie-
the only time that Prairie Dunes has hosted the U.S. Women's Open.
What a great venue.
Yep. Again, you put that, I think, I know we're going to get there, but like Inverness jumps out at me. There's a ton of these clubs that were like, wait, what are we doing? Like, come on. But I get it.
What are we doing? All right. 2003, Hillary Lunke, Lunk, I don't know, I hope I'm saying her name right. She becomes the first qualifier to win right after we changed the qualifying formats. That's pretty sick. That's a pretty long road to the U.S. Women's Open. So shout out Hillary for her one and done. That's pretty significant.
Well, and I was going to say nothing against Hillary, but kind of truly another like very random winner in the grand sense of in the grand scheme of things. That's what I'm trying to say. This win would be not only her only top 10 in a major. I believe her next best finish would be a tie for 37th at the women's or I guess this is the LPGA championship. What would be the KPMG? Didn't win anywhere else on the LPGA tour. Like truly a career week for Hillary, which is both cool and I think even more impressive as we're in this string of like Hall of Fame women kind of trading the US Open. It makes it more that much more shocking, I guess.
Can I fast forward 2 years?
Please.
All right, let's go to 2005. This one's crazy because Lorena Ochoa almost wins a U.S. Women's Open. So let's get into Lorena real quick before we get into our winner, Birdie Kim. Lorena almost wins by making 4 birdies on the back 9, and she led with 1 hole left. She makes a quad on the final hole to finish 4 strokes behind Birdie Kim, who would hold out from a greenside bunker to win her only major and LPGA title.
Yeah, like really her only decent showing in any major as well. I remember this vividly. I remember very, very young. Yeah. I think she was 15 years old. Michelle Lee West at the time, tied for the lead going into the final round. Who'd you have? Paula Creamer, who was like barely 18. Morgan Pressel in contention. Brittany Lang. Like this is really when you started to see like everybody was talking about this young wave of players who were coming. And the growth of women's golf, and this was the first time Cherry Hills that I remember like very much living through this.
This Lorena Ochoa would never win a U.S. Women's Open.
Nope.
So this,
that was as close as she got.
Interesting. Yeah. I didn't realize Birdie Kim was such a one and done either. Truly. I would have thought, she probably won, some LPGA titles, maybe contended elsewhere, but God, this was a true. I wonder how successful she was. I assume she probably went back and played a bunch maybe in Korea.
Probably.
But nothing stateside.
Should give her half a U.S. Women's Open.
Well, I'm sorry. I just clicked into her. I'm seeing she was involved in a 2009 car accident, which I think played a big part in limiting her golf success. So that would explain it. Okay.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Oh. All right. Let's get into the rest of the late 2000s. We have a weird start to 2006, but Annika's back, and she's back for one more.
Probably all roided out, right? That's when she comes back and she just pounded it.
Of course. I cannot stress it.
Of course.
Allegedly.
Alleged, yes.
Allegedly. All right. First day, we're delayed by fog for an entire day. So the first round actually does not get started until that Friday. And the last 2 rounds take place on Sunday, which I know you love, Big. I know you would love to hear. We're running back a 36-hole day at the U.S. Women's Open.
Newport
So
Country
sick.
Club.
We talked about this one with Jane. She was tied for the lead. She was
Yeah.
her first U.S. Women's Open as an amateur, tied for the lead
As an
after
am.
day one.
Big showing for her. So Annika wins over Pat Hurst in an 18-hole Monday playoff in her last U.S. Women's Open title, and that gave her over $20 million in career earnings up until that point. So that was crazy. That was the final 18-hole playoff. That format actually ended up changing in 2007, which we'll get into. But it changed to a 3-hole aggregate, and that actually only took place in 2011. But the last 18-hole playoff of the U.S. Women's Open, Annika took part in over Pat Hurst, which is pretty crazy.
Massive Pat Hurst fan. We got to know her a little bit when she was Solheim Cup captain. I'll say Pat had a career 0-4 LPGA Tour playoff record, and 3 of those 4 losses were to Annika, which is tough. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not good. I also want to say again, just because I mentioned her the year prior, but we're again here in Michelle Wie territory. Now a professional, finishes T3, two strokes back there, tied with Sayri Pak. And this is like every year. You know, I think it's very weird, and I know we get into this, and we talked about this while we were getting ready for Pebble Beach and her retirement. We talked about it the year after that. We talked about it last year. And I think people forget how good Michelle was, how much she put herself in position at US Opens, the toughest test that they see every single year, and how much her 2014 win actually meant, because it's a lot more than just the single major.
Yeah. Yeah, this was kind of in the stretch 2005, 2006 for Michelle, where she finished runner up as low am at the KPMG. She's tied for 3rd low am at the Women's British to end 2025. Comes back as a pro, T3 at Chevron, T3 at the U.S. Women's Open. Will finish T3 at the KPM or T5 at the KPMG. I mean, she is just constantly putting herself in contention at majors, both as an amateur and then as a pro. It's like the Michelle mania is full swing at this point.
Yeah. 2006, I remember it was the first time that I outside of 98, when I can't even remember her name, was in the playoff, that was still in college going to Duke. But this was also Amanda Blumenhurst was like the it player in college women's golf, and she qualified as an amateur. She was still at Duke playing. She ends up finishing T10. But from Scottsdale at the time, I was in college in Scottsdale, and she practiced at Greyhawk, and I remember her like grinding, and I'm like, "Oh man, like, what are you doing? You just got done with like NCAAs and stuff." She's like, "Oh, I have like the US Open this week, like just getting ready to leave." I was like, "Oh, that's sweet, man. Like, have fun."
Yeah.
I actually want to pose a question to you guys. I see
Okay.
your thoughts. Can we kind of, and not their careers, this is definitely not a career comp by any stretch, but contending for Nancy in 1975 to Michelle contending and coming in 2nd place in 2006, is there one that's more impressive than the other? Are they as equally impressive? They're both amateurs.
Yeah, tough for me to say, because I obviously wasn't around when Nancy was first contending, so I didn't have a great sense. But I do like the parallel. I think there's probably between just the excitement that their rivals created in and around the game of golf. I do like the comparison.
The only thing, so where we're at in Michelle's very young career still, is that as an amateur, she had already received sponsors invites to the Sony Open. She played in PGA Tour event. You know, she had played in multiple majors already. Specifically, like I remember Kraft Nabisco, like she was in there very, very, very early. This is when she started trying to qualify for the U.S. Men's Open, and I think it's a little bit different, maybe just because of exposure based off of the times. Phenomenal finish because like she truly was the person who was supposed to win anything that she touched, which is crazy to think about these expectations that we put on a 14, 15, 16-year-old girl. Like,
I know.
what are we
It's so
doing?
unfair. Yeah.
Versus Nancy at the time, who was a little bit older, still very much an amateur, but like seemed to have life a little bit more figured out and wasn't so much just thrust into the spotlight the way that Michelle was.
Just such a different time to be an amateur golfer, to be a popular amateur golfer doing record-breaking things, I guess.
Mhm.
I don't know. Just was totally nuts. Yeah, and not a lot of that like ends up like you said, like the youth wave helps kind of characterize those late 2000s, early 2010s, the resulting Solheim Cup teams and so forth. Like it's crazy the way that the amateurs were really elevating and putting a lot of pressure a little bit on the professional players at this time. Like I don't know. And we see it now too in a lot of ways, but I think it really actually had a lot of momentum again at this point, which is just funny to consider. Like so many of the top end players in women's golf, I mean, around the start of this championship, a lot of them were amateurs. I mean, and that's, you know, with the women who were turning professional, they were very good, but not many of them. Many of them still elected to stay amateur, not play professional women's golf because you just really couldn't make a career off of it at all for a long time. And just speaks to how difficult it was and still is. But yeah, I'm sorry that got super tangential, but I think it's an interesting callback to what this championship and what women's golf once was.
Well, and sorry, just to kind of connect, we were talking about how illustrious the 90s were for winners, right? And Hall of Famers and, Annika and Sayri. I think the amateur wave is probably no small result of that, that wave of like great champions in the 90s. I'm sure influenced a ton of girls to get in the game and really push forward the work and the instruction. And I don't know, I don't have any like solid evidence to support that, but it would seem like, hey, you enjoy this period in the 90s where it's just banger after banger, Hall of Famer, it's gonna influence kind of the next generation. And we see that bubbling up into the mid 2000s, late 2000s.
Yeah, just go look
have
at
to think that's related.
the 2007 final leaderboard. There's 2 American flags on it. Christy Kerr, who won, and Morgan Pressel, who finished T10. You have Japan. You have let's see, a ton. There's 6, 7 Koreans, Lorena Ochoa, and then Angela Park from Brazil. Like
Yeah,
that's the first.
we've truly gotten international now.
That's the
Yeah.
first like final U.S. Women's Open board where you're like, whoa, that's a lot of
Yeah.
Korean flags. To
Yeah.
include Sayri, still right there, leading the way.
Yep.
And you have NB finally on the scene, and GI, and it's crazy. Aimi Azato, who's going to be,
Yeah.
continuous through the 2010s. It's phenomenal once you actually look at it.
Shall we wrap up the late 2000s?
Please.
All right. Christy Kerr wins in 2007. The first of 2 titles. We have a lot of weather delays this year too. I know that's been a pattern of late. But the third round is forced to be played on Sunday morning. So that's significant. And then in 2008, we have a young winner step onto the scene. Imby Park at 19 years old wins the U.S. Women's Open and remains tied for the youngest winner to win a U.S. Women's Open.
I did not realize that. Yeah. I'm not sure I would have known that had you asked me as a piece of trivia. And Helen Alfredson, she was the runner-up. You know, Helen, great career in her own right.
Helen's back. She was back for more. Love that.
Finished runner-up at the U.S. Open. What is it? 15 years apart. That's pretty crazy.
Pretty crazy. All right, let's get into the 2010s. Let's round this out. We are a little bit threatened as a major in terms of purse size. Another major steps onto the scene in early part of this decade. We also changed the schedule, so we're not going to play in July anymore at a certain point. And we also see a little more parity. So once again, all that youth, all those inspired individuals are on the scene and they're just plugging away at these championships. We see that trend now in a lot of senses. I feel like, I don't know, we don't have to get back into a parity discussion, but I think the 2010s helps kind of ring that parity home. All right, let's get into our second to last decade. 2010, first time since 2001 where qualifying for the U.S. Women's Open takes place in a single 36-hole sectional qualifier instead of 2 stages. Also important, Annika, I put an asterisk here, Annika and Lorena announced that they're retired.
That's
interesting.
Big.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just want to say we are fully in the Korean Revolution right now,
Yep.
too. I mean, Cody, you hinted at it there, but these between 2008 and 2017, Korean women would win 7 of the 10 U.S. Women's Open. You have Paula Kramer, Michelle Wie, and Brittany Lang, kind of 3 of that like young. Expected so much of them from an American perspective. They were able to get some wins there, but other than that, it was Koreans just dominating this event.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that they didn't win, they finished runner-up at.
Yeah, like it is. Holy shit.
Related, 2011, Soyeon Yu wins in a Monday finish. So still got a couple of those Monday finishes left. Inbee Park is back in 2013. She wins her 3rd consecutive major of the year. I feel like I was really experiencing this on the periphery. Like I kind of knew that was happening, but I wasn't into golf yet. It would be a few more years until I actually started following golf. But I'm curious what that experiencing that in real time was like, because that's crazy.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like truly I wish I had more of an appreciation for it in the moment. I wish I was paying, quite honestly, like more attention to it in the moment. I can certainly remember the discussion and the buzz, but I just don't think I was as tuned in as I as I should have been, quite honestly.
I remember this. So this is 2013 what we're talking about, and I was of course deployed this summer, and thankfully the Armed Forces Network, it doesn't matter, they basically, if there's golf on any TV, they're going to have a channel dedicated to it. What sticks out to me is that it was the first time in a long time that they're back in New York, and they're out on Long Island at Sabonic, and that course absolutely slapped. And I remember like just big blimp shots of a pretty cool spot, and being like, oh wow, there's like Shinnecock next door and National Golf Links of America, and then you have Inbee Park, like just stunting all over everyone. You had a young Paula Creamer out there. You had somebody who had played in a couple U.S. Opens already, but is now a professional, in Jess Corda, coming onto the scene here. Brittany Lang. Shang Fen, who becomes like everybody's favorite, is right there in the top 10. It's pretty stacked from top to bottom.
I do remember some of that buzz about Sabonic, Cody. You're right, because it was a relatively new club, and they were getting this big event. It was out on Long Island. Yeah, I do remember that.
That's so dope. All right, 2014, it finally happens. Michelle Wie wins the U.S. Women's Open after many attempts, many efforts, and this would be her lone major championship. And gosh, that I was so I had a professor in college who wrote a book about Michelle Wie, and that was like probably the first time that I like really took a dive into women's golf history. And I didn't know much about Michelle Wie at the time. I mean, I kind of knew, like, I was like, oh, she was like really really famous, but I didn't know exactly know for what. I was like, okay, she played in a PGA Tour event, cool, like seems like she was a good player, let me dive in. And this book was actually published before Michelle had won the US Women's Open. So I think it was published a couple of years before that. And it was kind of in the midst of her efforts and triumphs and, you know, attempts and failures and battle with injury and everything and the media coverage. And I think to finally do that and to have that stamp on her career at the most, you know, arguably, and there's plenty of debate about it, but arguably the most prestigious women's major, to be the one that you capture, I think I don't think that I'm sure if you ask Michelle, I mean, she'd probably pick that one out of all of them to get for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. Pinehurst #2, very fitting place to win your lone major championship, your lone U.S. Open. That, of course, was the year the USGA did the back-to-back women's and men's events at Pinehurst, which was cool.
The women being a week after. So there was a lot of speculation going into this. And I think it worked out, and it was a lot cooler than people give it credit to. I don't think it helped that both winners basically ran completely away, the men and women side. It wasn't too much of a competition. It was so baked out. A new Pinehurst #2 that people hadn't seen before. So, you know, native areas and not a lot of green grass and super fast greens. Guys, I lived in Pinehurst. I experienced all this. Of course, I was deployed, but we rented our house to Golf Channel. So like Golf Channel production people stayed in our house, and they moved all of our furniture out and put like bunk beds in every room possible. And I think they slept like 22 people in that house
Oh my.
That's
that week,
crazy.
which is
Yeah.
crazy. I remember I say there was a lot of like, oh, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Because supporters of women's golf, they were very much concerned because the men were a week prior that like, hey, how are you going to handle like divot patterns and stuff like that? Is the course is going to be like completely chewed up from the men and gallery traffic and everything. And that turned out not to be the case at all. Like everything was completely fine and ready to rock. And I'm excited for them because they're going to do it again. And there's no other location where, you know, that has kind of the balls to take this on like Pinehurst does. And I think it's going to be really, really, really cool.
Yeah.
Honestly, having the women play in, you know, the local area gets spoiled because a lot of people like the US Women's Open, when they think of North Carolina, naturally everybody thinks of Pine Needles, which has done everything possible to welcome the US Open, you know, US Open, Women's Open there. You're going to hear it's going to come up as another venue as the years go by once we get in the 2020s. And this was kind of like a shock because the Pine Needles, Mid Pines, you know, the Miller family was like, what the hell, man? Like we've been here supporting the USGA and all of this. And now all of a sudden, like the big brother up the hill that gets anything that they want, like they're taking our national championship away. So there's a lot more to it than just, you know, it being on #2, at least locally, but a huge success overall.
2 AMs to note here. Minji Lee and Brooke Henderson both had good tournaments this year. And Lydia Ko, who I think a lot of people thought would be an AM still at this event, had turned pro the fall prior, October 2013. So she was competing here as a professional now.
Not only that, you're missing another AM that made tons of news that week. Of course, that's Lucy Lee talking about eating ice cream and everything else.
Yeah. How could I forget that?
Biggs girl Steph Meadows bursting onto the scene, finishing third. Stacey Lewis ended up taking second here to Michelle. finishing at even. Michelle won at 2 under.
But you're right, Cody. The final results look a lot closer than this final round
Correct.
actually was. Amy Yang, who went in tied, she kind of went away early, and Michelle was just really protecting a pretty sizable lead for most of the day.
Yeah, I mean, she got it to like 3 under at one point in time, and then gave a couple back on the way in. But it's phenomenal. And anybody who visits Pinehurst, you know, you can walk through the halls there, and the history lives on. It's really, really cool.
So dope. All right, let's keep it going. So the hype and, you know, the Michelle mania follows in the year after, because they go to Lancaster and they set an attendance record of 135,000, which is really, really cool. Fox
I think
Sports,
this is just
yeah, sorry.
props to Lancaster.
Yeah.
Like, what an awesome community and an awesome host course. I mean, we would see them in 2024 again, but God, just a great place to have this tournament
Shout
every decade or so.
Yep. Yeah. I should have mentioned in 2014, that was the final year that the U.S. Women's Open would air on ESPN, because this year in 2015, Fox Sports has the rights. Also in 2014, they introduced international qualifying, which I think was a little bit overdue, but they did it. And in 2015, our winner is In-Ji Chun.
Who, of course, hopefully people were paying attention last year, developed a very strong bond with the local Lancaster community, has funded scholarships, like a real, you would never think maybe In-Ji Chung and central Pennsylvania's would forge such a deep bond, but some really cool stuff resulting from her victory here.
Very cool. All right, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to 2018 with a player named Arya Jutanagarn wins, which was kind of in the mass of like her just being so dominant too. I mean, gosh, like just this like mini stretches of dominance for people. They don't start. It's almost like the dominance for people, and maybe we see this trend a little bit now, but like the dominance is so condensed between these players instead of lasting between back-to-backs and all that. I mean, with the exception of Inbee Park, who won twice. I mean, just these condensed crazy years.
Yeah, this was a crazy. We touched on this during the Chevron recap, but this was a crazy championship, a final round for Arya. I don't know, Jordan, if you have more to go into it, or if you'd like me to lead this.
Please lead the way.
I mean, she. Let me refresh here. She entered the final round. She was 4 shots up, and at one time, I think had like midway through a round, had like a 7-shot lead at least, making the turn. She had gotten it to 16 under. The next closest was 9 under. And then just started slowly bleeding out, tripled 10, eventually got to the point where she was tied at the end of 18 holes with Hoo-Joo Kim, went to a playoff and ended up winning in the playoff. It was I guess it was a 2-hole aggregate, but they tied the first 2 holes. And so then they played a third and tied. And then finally on the 4th, Arya won that hole by a single stroke. But I think is both, great. She obviously won the U.S. Open. You can't take that away from her, but would just point towards like some massive closing issues, which would, of course, rear its ugly head again this year, a couple months ago at the Chevron.
Yep. All right. Notably, we don't play in July anymore. We play in May now. So still hot U.S. Women's Open. We're still in the summer, but not as hot. So that opens things up a little bit more.
There's a little bit of backstory there too, is that move not necessarily at the direction of the USGA or Heat or anything, but at the direction of the host club, which would be Shoal Creek. So basically, if you want it to be here, this is the time that you have available. If not, you're not going to have it here.
I feel like Wolfie probably made that declaration.
Probably. Yeah. We'll have to hit him up. But first year, the prize fund JP, in 2018, we finally get to its second year at $5 million, but it seems like we're peaking here until we like explode when we talk about money in the women's game.
Yep. And I did forget to mention, back in 2013 was the first year of the Evian. And in that year, the Evian and the U.S. Women's Open both had the same size purse of $3.25 million. And then in 2014, the year that Michelle wins, the purse goes up to $4 million. So the U.S. Women's Open once again regains its spot as the biggest purse in women's golf.
Which, props to Evian for helping to force that issue, I think. I think that's obviously why Evian was bestowed major status. I think as we're a decade on now, though, it's like something we talk about, like, should Evian still be a major, right? But at the time, you're exactly right. They forced the USGA at least to really start upping the purse.
Yep. Also to note, in 2018, the playoff format is changed. So instead of 3 aggregate holes, we have 2 aggregate holes followed by sudden death. So
We're
that's
going the wrong
important.
direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate it.
I know. I hate it. I hate it too. That actually, funny enough, that was kind of a sweeping change. They did it for not just the U.S. Women's Open, but also the U.S. Open, Senior Open, and then the Senior Women. So you just did it all in a batch, which I thought was interesting. All right. We ready? We're getting close to wrapping. We're getting into the 2020s.
So 2020, I'll say, first U.S. Women's Open that I attended down at
Ooh.
Champions Golf Club in Houston. It was COVID affected. I believe it was in the fall, Jordan. I don't know if you have the specific dates, but Tron and I went down to Houston for a couple days and we weren't there for the whole weekend, but we spent at least Thursday. I forget if it was Thursday and Friday out at Champions. So some personal history with this one being the first one that I attended.
Yeah, that U.S. Women's Open, I kind of remember being on the periphery because that's when I was just getting into golf. I was like, I kind of remember like hearing about it, and like all of the championships being moved that year and being like, oh, like interesting. And then when Alim Kim won, I'm like, oh, who's that? Again, was barely into women's golf at this time, was still really deep into the college golf and amateur scene. So yeah, it's just a strange year, but I can't imagine the on-site experience. That probably was really unique.
Well,
You
and
don't have
also
to worry about heat. It was in
No.
December and everybody was bundled up.
That's
and
what it was.
There's some
Yeah.
incredible images if you go back and look at it or watch it on YouTube of like truly how cold some of these players were. First time ever that the first 2 rounds were played on 2 different golf courses.
That was the other thing I was going to note.
So
good catch there.
Champions Golf Club, just a really good host and a lot of history in the Houston area, but truly doing everything that they possibly could just to get the championship in 2020.
This was also the first time we were exposed to Lynn Grant. She, through the first 2 rounds as an amateur, was solo second. And I remember watching her a little bit. Tron and I were obviously very impressed. Still waiting for the full Lynn Grant breakout, but this was the first time I remember seeing her swing a golf club and hit some shots.
All right, 21. Let's get into Miss Yuka Sasso, who at the time played for the Philippines, but now plays under the country of Japan. She now defeats, which interesting to revisit the context of her playing for the Philippines at the time, because she doesn't defeat a countrywoman, but now she does. She beats Nasa Hataoka on the 3rd hole of a sudden death playoff. After they both tie at 4 under par. This is also kind of the famous Lexi implosion, where she ends up finishing 3rd. She had a 5-stroke lead just before midway point, but drops back 5 on the back 9, bogeys the last 2 holes, and misses the playoff by 1 stroke.
Yeah. Whew. This was tough for old Lexi. She was through the 13th hole. She was 4 shots up on both Yuka and Nasa Hataoka with bogey 14, bogey 17, bogey 18, while both Yuka and Nasa found a couple birdies. This was a great championship.
Yes.
Not only, you had Lexi kind of choking it away. Yuka was this just young, fearless, weren't quite sure who she was, but hit some amazing iron shots. Nasa, great competitor. It was a really good leaderboard also at Olympic Club. I thought this was a great tournament.
You don't remember what you were so fired up about this week?
No, remind me.
You were beside yourselves about the coverage
God.
and run that young Mega Gane was getting.
Gane.
Oh, that's right. This was the Mega Gane tournament. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's
We're
right.
in prime NLU season when we're really, deep into the women's game here, and you were beside yourself.
TC. I think that was TC a little bit. I may have joined him for some kicks and gigs, but yeah, he was upset at how much shine she was getting, wasn't he?
So much shine. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's hard to
She had a hell of a week though.
Yep.
Incredible week, and it's crazy to think she wasn't in college yet. She was committed to Stanford. Now she's finishing up.
Right.
As we started this podcast, she was one of the 2 points that Mega kicked ass in her final match in the championship, and excited to see what she ends up doing as she starts playing full time here. But looking at this leaderboard, of course, Yuko wins. Nasa is right there in the playoff, loses. Lexi, it's people joke about it, and people are, I don't, unless you go back and watch it, you don't realize how big of it's just a straight up choke job. It was.
Yeah.
And there's so much from that tournament that is still running to this day of you can see herself having flashbacks when she gets into that moment. It's crazy to watch. And to see it playing out in front of you. I remember just driving herself in the center of fairways and just duffing chips, and then her going to putt and having 100% confidence in the world. It's not even finish 4 feet around the hole.
That's the thing I remember.
This doesn't have a chance.
Yeah.
So as much as we say a couple years back talking about Aria and the struggles that she had closing, this is that times 10.
Times 10.
I had no idea until I'm looking back on it now. I had no idea that Yuka started the final round at 6 under and then doubled the second hole and doubled the third hole.
Yes.
That's how Lexi opened up that huge lead. Yeah, I blacked that out.
They started one off, so Lexi started started her fourth at 7 under. Yuka was at 6, and then a little bit of space back there. Mega was at 3 under. But if you look at this final leaderboard again, Lexi, Shang right there at T4 with Megan Kang again. I would love, honestly, if it's ever possible to have a real conversation what's going on with Megan Kang? I don't know.
I know.
Angel Yin, young Angel Yin at the time, 6th place, tied for 7. Brooke Henderson, Arya Jatanakarn, Jung Young Ko, lead 6. MB Park, still it's phenomenal. This tournament at an incredible venue. Venues matter so much, and I just remember it popping. It was glowing on TV.
Popping. All right. So getting to 22. We're back at Pine Needles. With Minji Lee winning at Pine Needles. Gosh, she won over, it was Mina Haragai, I remember. And I remember that weekend was tremendous. And the way that Mina also collapsed in the final round at Pine Needles, that was also really crazy. So 2 pretty big collapses back to back made for some really interesting US Women's Opens. Also, another interesting Low-Am, Ingrid Lindblad finishes tied for 11th. She has a crazy week this week. She beats the amateur scoring records over 18, 36, and 54 holes and ties the 72-hole amateur record in the tournament. I mean, just what a crazy breakout for her. And was in the midst of one of the best college golf careers on the women's side that we've seen for sure. So that was a really interesting time in her amateur career. But yeah, 22 I thought was a cool year.
I am glad you thought it was a cool year. I got to be totally honest. This was a bit of a letdown tournament for me. I thought Pine Needles played way too easy. I wanted it to be more difficult. And I just thought the leaderboard wasn't. The early rounds were great. Yeah, like you said, you had Ingrid. But yeah, I felt like it was a bit disappointing in the end for me, JP.
They
But
did not.
okay to agree to disagree
Yeah, we
there.
totally can.
I was at this tournament, and they did not cut and roll the greens as they had said because they were worried at the time. It was very, very dry that spring, and this was a early summer, beginning of June event, and they were worried that they would get away. You mentioned Ingrid. Ingrid was on fire. She had a morning. She was early late for tee time, so when she started, she was the first round leader, and people were like, "Holy shit!" And then obviously, Mina came out in the afternoon and shot a one better than her, but Ingrid came out hot. You had a young amateur, another young amateur in the field by the name of Rose Zhang, whose dad was caddying
that's
for
right.
her.
Yup.
We are just coming off at this point in time, filming a week in the life with the Stanford women's golf team. What else happened that week? Oh, it was very, very weird, secretive because we had I'm going to say Danielle Kang back again. This is the first tournament that she played in a couple months because she said that she had a tumor on her spine, but nobody actually, or
yeah.
actually didn't even call it a tumor, a mass that was taken care of on her spine. There was a lot of weird stuff going on there. And really, I know it doesn't show up on the final leaderboard, but this was kind of like Megan Kang's U.S. Women's Open coming out party. Like absolutely stomping around that place, hitting incredible shots, getting up and down from everywhere, and was just a ton of fun to watch. But I'll meet you there, Big. The end, even though we had a very deserving champion in Min Ji, absolutely went out and took it 1-4. The rest of it was kind of like, okay. Min Ji shot even par in the final round to win. Like literally nobody went and like
That
tried
course
to
could have
get her.
been
Mhm.
fiery all week, and like you said, they backed off of it, and I was very disappointed in that.
Yep.
The Minji's 271 total, I think, is a U.S. Women's Open record for low 4-round score.
You mentioned Rose. I think I look back with rose-colored glasses, for lack of better term, at this event because this was right before the Curtis Cup at Marion, and that's been my favorite week on site at an event ever. So I think I was just very fired up for amateur golf
That's
in
fair.
this month.
That's fair. Yeah. I think just coming from the Olympic club the year before where it was just wild and tough, and that final round drama to this event it was a bit of a letdown for me.
Funny thing is that I spent the first I can't remember if it was Thursday or Friday round. So obviously we were a couple years into ANWA then, but Anna Davis
Yep.
was playing. This is the year that she won ANWA. She was a high school kid, and it was a couple months later at the U.S. Women's Open. But I walked had to have been Friday. I walked almost the entire round with her dad and her twin brother, and like just shot the shit and like learned a ton about them that the following year would come into play when we're at Pebble.
That's right.
It was so crazy
Pebble-
also for the Curtis Cup
Oh,
that year. Anna was only an alternate.
huh.
I mean, which that was an incredible Curtis Cup US team. But yeah, she won the Anwell that year and was only the alternate.
So 2022, real quick, big purse jump. Total purse gets to 10 million. That's almost a double from the year before. The winner share 1,800,000, almost double from the year before. So this is really, I think, part of Mike Wan, his initiative to even out the purses between the women's and men's open. So wanted to note that significance. 2023, Jordan, I'll tee up. We all went out to Pebble. We enjoyed a great week out there. I believe this was your first U.S. Women's Open in person.
This was my first U.S. Women's Open in person, and I cried so much before because I was just so nervous to go. I was so nervous. Like, I was so excited, but I had such the biggest bundle of nerves. I remember I cried before the night before my flight. I just had like a total nervous breakdown because I was so I don't know, just very nervous, but like had the best week, truly. I mean, Pebble was incredible. I think back to that week all the time. But yeah, that was the first time we all met in person, my first US Women's Open. And Pebble was unreal. Like, what a venue to really elevate this championship.
Yeah. This was, besides all of that, you'll remember Bailey Tardy was blazing the field. She was
I
your
don't
36-hole
remember
leader.
her. I only remember her dog.
Dog.
You hating on her.
I made the very bold call that she would not win. What else was this week? Of course, Charlie Hall played some magnificent golf, especially
Incredible.
Sunday as she was trying to run down Allison Corpuz. And just shout out to Allison Corpuz. She played such good, steady, solid golf. Very deserving champion.
I remember this week too being so much rose buzz because this was her first US Women's Open as a professional. And this was where she also had shot I think it was the women's course record of 63, and that she was getting asked a lot about that. Like, that was very much the dominant narrative that week.
Yeah, she'd finished tie for 9th this week, and it almost felt like a disappointment.
Yep.
Which is kind of crazy in retrospect.
Considering she had won the Mizuho just like maybe not even 2 months before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then last year, I don't know how much we got to go into that, but Yuka wins her second one at Lancaster. Anything you want to note there, Jordan?
No, she's playing under the Japan flag now, so she officially beats another countrywoman in Hinako Shibuno. But yeah, I, like the rest of us, are wondering if Yuka will win anything besides a U.S. Women's Open, because she just really loves winning those. I also didn't mention when she first won the U.S. Women's Open back in 21, she had tied Inbee for being the youngest player to ever do it, which I think is significant.
Yeah. She, of course, this was Nelly Corda, Nelly Mania last year, and that quickly disappeared on that. What was it, like her second hole of the day, that par 3, where she made an astronomical number. Yuka was so good. I mean, the lasting images are some of the iron shots she hit coming down the stretch to seal the win. She's so good, and we still can't figure out how that doesn't translate more week to week on the LPGA Tour. It's crazy.
You guys want to know something crazy? Is when we got to the 90s and we really centered around 98 and everything that kind of meant, and we did a pretty good job of calling out, countries represented in the top 10 following the years that we hit. This is the first year in, like, I think 22 years or something like that there was not a Korean in the top 10 at this major championship.
Whoa.
You have Japan, you have Thailand, you have the United States, and you have Australia. 0 Koreans finished in the top 10.
So it scatters around the East. Wow.
And so, JP, here we are, 2025, Erin Hills. First time that the women will play this venue. I don't know about you guys. I am super excited to get another look at it under US Open conditioning, and just as a major venue for the women. I couldn't be more excited. We talked about, good broadcast. I think NBC is going to put their absolute best foot forward which will be nice to see. But yeah, JP, awesome history. Thank you very much. Enjoyed taking a stroll through the history of this event. Guys, I think we just end with some quick predictions, if you don't mind. Let's go around and just predict a winner. I'll go first. I can't get away from my girl Gino. I'm just going to keep picking her. I'm taking Gino Titticum. Last time we saw her, she won the Mizuho. Really, really convincing, solid play from her. I'm taking her up in Wisconsin. Cody, how about you?
I'm going to meet you right there. It's very hard to say anybody outside of Gino right now. I don't know. We could play this game, but sure, let's do it.
JP?
Then I might have to stick my neck out a little bit. I think I'm gonna go Minji. You guys were not giving her
That's a
credit
good pick.
earlier. She's playing really well. She's leading in strokes gained right now.
Yeah. Are you guys shocked that had I told you last year at this time in 2025, none of us will pick Nelly Korda to win? I think that would be pretty shocking. In the moment, it's not, but yeah, it's wild how that is. How about JP? Leave us with a low am. Who's your low am pick?
Kiara Romero,
Okay. What's her deal? Refresh me.
Oregon. Oregon gets out in the semifinals, but she had a phenomenal year, made some incredible scoring records. I think she has a really diversified game, and I think she could play pretty well depending on the setup. If it sets up pretty fair, I think Kiara could make a pretty big move this week. I don't know. I am like always kind of banging the Kiara Romero drum because I just don't think she gets the credit that she deserves. She's made a lot of good runs in USGA championships, and I truly just, if you're a junior winner, I maybe I'll show a little bit of bias to you, but I think she could have a good week.
All right. Well, we'll be back. Like I said, happy hour Wednesday, live show Saturday, live show Sunday. Happy hour. We'll have some more predictions. But JP, this was awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody listening. Thank you to Titleist. Thank you to Omni. Thank you, Cody. I hope everybody listening and watching enjoys the hell out of the U.S. Women's Open.
Let's
It's going to be
go.
a good one.